Hello. We're also on the wrong microphone.
Set it up.
Yeah.
Do the drop down on the mic. And to change the top. Yep. And then, yeah, there you go. All right. All right. So it's 6:31 p.m. I'm officially opening the select board meeting for Wednesday, April 8th. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Would you guys like to?
We only have 3 representatives, therefore we don't have a quorum, so.
All right, so the finance committee is going to hang out for just a minute. And before we get started, are there any citizens petitions online or in person that would like to address the board about something that is not currently on the agenda?
Before you do that, we now have quorum, so I will open the FinCom meeting at 6:32.
Awesome.
And Jesse's online, so any votes need to be a roll call.
Yep. All right, so if anybody wants to speak, please raise your hand. Seeing as there is nobody, our agenda tonight is budget and schools. So we can get started with Blackstone Valley. Why don't you come on up?
Thank you.
Stay back here. I can do this from here. If you want.
Give me another chair.
Sure, we can pull a chair over for you.
Thank you.
And try to share screen. Let's see if I can get this going. Works. There you go. Good evening, everyone. Anthony Steele, Superintendent Director of Valley Tech. Appreciate the opportunity to come and present to you tonight. This is Nicole. Introduce yourself.
Hi, Nicole Ferguson, the business manager.
One thing we did a little differently was we took the budget booklet that we sent you. We put it online. You can find it right here under the district tab under the budget. So Nicole will scroll along as we go. I always envision the folks in Zoom land watching a bunch of people flip through a book they can't see. So we tried to upgrade that. It's also there in perpetuity. So anytime you want to go and look at it, you can do that. That being said, I have extra copies. If anybody needs a copy of the budget book, happy to pass them around now.
So the select board has some, but the FinCom members here.
We'll send those down and I'll take whatever we have left over at the end. How's that? Okay. So again, thank you for the opportunity. The budget book itself is another example of our students' work. So this was produced in-house and also they assisted with the layout and everything else. I will say that all things at BVT in terms of our students and learning are going quite well. Focus this presentation more on the finances of the school. If you have any questions or want to talk about how the kids are doing, I can do that all day long and happy to. But for disclosure, really focused on the finances here. Page 1 is just a make subcommittee. So our budget subcommittee is comprised of a subset of our full school committee, as well as Ms. Ferguson here, a business manager, our district treasurer, myself, Dr. Connors, the assistant superintendent, as well as a few of our business office staff. Next page, page 4, is our mission and core values. I'm not going to focus on that, but it is important to keep that in front of you at all times and make sure that you stay the course. Page 5 is a cover letter from me. I'm not going to read it to you, but I will point out a couple things I think are significant about this budget. First, as an autonomous regional school, with 13 member towns, it's important for us to really pay attention to what's going on with our member towns. I think it's fair to say across the entire Commonwealth, towns are having difficulty with the ability to generate revenue, and certainly the classic problem of expenses that far exceed the revenue you're able to create or generate. That's certainly true in the 13 towns we serve. We're keenly pay attention to that, and of the 11 school districts that also feed students to us, at least half of them are in some type of an override situation. So it's not unique even to the Valley, but we're certainly aware of it and sensitive to it. I started as the superintendent on July 1, and by July 2nd, I think I have 4 or 5 meetings lined up with different towns concerned about expenditures for the following year. We started off at Valley Tech the beginning of the year, actually it was the summer, looking at ways that we could be more efficient, cut costs, but ultimately protect the quality of the education. And it's really been a daily focal point of ours. We shared that with the faculty, with all the staff as well, and really asked them to, work with us together as an entire team to try to do things more efficiently. That theme is quite important and was quite, let's say, pivotal to creating this budget. I'll give you the first example. We sit down annually to negotiate our health insurance for our active employees. We do a deep dive with our broker, 5 or 6 sessions, really looking at what's driving increases, driving costs. One of those drivers was the pharmaceuticals, of course, and we had the offer that if we would or could drop GLP-1 benefit, that certainly would represent a savings, or conversely, a large increase if we did not. Of course, that has to be impact bargained. So we went to our Teachers Association and asked them to consider giving up that benefit, and they overwhelmingly voted to do that. And we were able to secure a 3.95% increase in health insurance for the year. We were thrilled with that. That's uncommon territory these days, but certainly was thankful that the staff got the message and were willing to work with us in that way. No sooner did we finish that, that we started the contract negotiation with the teachers for the next 3-year teachers contract. About 35 years ago, we extended our school year to 195 days for staff, 193 for students. Many of those years, the teachers had, considered bargaining for fewer days. Back then, 35 years ago, there was an initiative to go to 200-day years for schools. Clearly, that didn't root and went away. We always kept those additional days because when the students are half in academics, half in shop, those extra 13 instructional days over the minimum certainly were important to us. So the school committee always guarded that as a key component to the quality of education and what we're able to do with students in a year. So it really wasn't something, not something that they were really interested in bargaining, but we took a look at that with the teachers, and we said, well, would you be willing to do longer days? So add minutes to the day. In this case, we wound up negotiating 5-minute longer day, but 5 fewer calendar days. We actually added the equivalent of 2 days of school for the kids, so from about 1,024 hours to about 1,040. In 5 less calendar days, and in exchange for that, they agreed to a 0, 0, 0 on the base. They are still able to step. The top step has nowhere to step to, so they negotiated 2, 1.5, 1. And again, both school committee and the Teachers Association coming together to creatively, come up with ways to save money, but not jeopardize the quality of what we do.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
How does that really materialize an extra 5 minutes in the day?
Well, you can do 5 minutes times 190.
I understand the math, but to me, the value, I don't know, that just feels like minutia that doesn't actually materially do anything other than, I just don't understand, what does a student get for another 5 minutes in one day? Well,
I can tell you that it wasn't just starting 5 minutes earlier. We also reconfigured the homeroom. Added almost, I think, 10 or 12 minutes a day. We have an 8-period day, so it allowed us to, there were 2 periods that were shorter than most, first and eighth, the last 8-period day. We not only made those equal length, but then added minutes to each one.
Yeah.
So it does, in my opinion, someone who's taught there for 29 years, I think it makes a considerable difference. And it's just a reconfiguration, but yeah, it's time on learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your teacher contracts are for 3 years.
Correct. So at the time when we were doing this budget, we weren't sure how this negotiation was going to end out. So of course we, as a placeholder in building the budget and using Lytics, which is the analytical tool for looking at the whole region for contracts. The norm was 11% over 3 years, or 375, 375, 375. So when we put that in as a placeholder, this contract saves us $323,000 this year. It's roughly 700 in year 2, and about 1 million in year 3. So it was about 2.1 million over 3 years. And again, we actually increased the contact time. Those are the kind of things that I'm just grateful as a new superintendent that I have staff and a school committee that are able to work together. They did that deal with no legal representation and did it fairly quickly. So that's good when you can get it. Those things, I never take it for granted. They never last forever, but that's what we're able to do these days. It's just that it seems everything that we try to do, I can fairly rely on everybody rowing in the same direction. On page 6 is just an overview of how we go about creating a budget in a given year. It really starts, the first iterations are in September with our program advisories. So part of running Chapter 74 programs, you have to have program advisories. So they're members who are in that trade, actively in that trade, who have 18 committees that meet with all 18 of our career programs. They advise on what skills are relevant, what's irrelevant, what's emerging, but they also advise on the budget, particularly around what equipment or technology is emerging that should be purchased. The budget subcommittee that I told you defined for you on page 1 starts meeting in October. We meet with each department head or representatives to build each series at a time, from the 1,000 to the 9,000 series. It's a zero-based budgeting process. So we start with a blank page, and each each group that comes in to present has to defend all of their requests. Particularly, we look at if there's any other way to acquire those things, particularly grants, donations. We look certainly at deltas, anything up or down, and explanations for that over prior year or trend. And ultimately work through each series, like I said, with understanding fully what the items are in there. We set a target at the beginning of the process. So not coincidentally, we were setting a target for 2.5% because that matches the 2.5% levy. And so we thought that that was a good gesture. We said we want to be good partners. We're trying to show our member towns that we're, earnest about at least not driving or contributing to the problem at hand. I can honestly tell you, back to that early in the process, it's great. You can set targets. I wasn't sure if it'd be achievable, but that was what we set out to do. The final budget, as we again built it in the manner I said, ultimately created a 7.22% budget year-over-year increase. So to get it to 2.5 required us to cut 1.52 million out of it. I have a detail page in the back. I'll go through exactly what comprises that 1.52, but it does include $650,000 of salary and wage and 8 FTEs. 88% of our budget is fixed costs. 56% of the budget is salary and wage. We simply cannot cut $1.52 million without getting into staffing. We have some questions that remain at this point because we just finished admissions for this incoming class in terms of what services and courses and things like that they'll need. We obviously have an idea of those 8 positions and what they'll be, but we are waiting until June to really make our final decisions on exactly which positions. The school council, which is parents, students, teachers, community members, also review this budget and make a recommendation to the school committee. We have our public hearing next year on March 12th, and the school committee subsequently then will vote to move the budget forward.
Can I just stop you for 1 second?
Sure.
So the budget that you started out with that you're proposing here, did you say you're losing full-time employees?
8.
8 of them. And are those teaching positions or are they?
It's completely across the board with support, teaching, all categories.
I'm just trying to figure out in the shop. So in theory, and I graduated from Valley Tech.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
So in the shop where you have 2 instructors, potentially you're going from 2 to 1.
Shops are probably the most restrictive because as you would know, those are your heavy industrial areas and things like that. We do have guidelines that we follow for safety and things like that, including even things like clinical settings. You can only have so many students to a teacher to meet the Board of Health and Board of Nursing and things like that. So that's actually a very tricky area. You simply can't make those cuts, nor would we want to make cuts that would even begin to jeopardize safety. We don't have a lot of shops that are underprescribed either. There's places full.
So it's 8 full-time employees reduction over the current year.
That's correct.
And those eight full-time employees on page 7 here, we see reductions in force, $650,000. So that's the negative of the salary coming off the budget there.
Correct.
So the positive of their salary is included in the expenses above that, correct?
Yeah, when I get to that page, I'll certainly maybe explain a little tighter, if that's okay.
Sit tight.
And in order to address your question there, Mr. Maroli, you're absolutely astute in that you I'll even say on the academic side, so I have a contractual number 28 to 1. So, you obviously don't have a lot of wiggle room for cutting there, and hence how it winds up being pretty broad in terms of all categories. Moving over to page 7, you get an overview of the revenues and expenses. Up at the top, you see Chapter 70 was 1.81%. As I initially saw that, I thought that was fairly flat, but as I compared notes with other districts, many got less than 1% this year. So, it gives me perspective on that number. Chapter 71, the regional transportation, is the governor's budget included an 80% reimbursement on Chapter 71. That's the number we used here, was the 80%. There have been proposals that it be funded at 100%, and you'll watch that number go up and down until it finally lands somewhere at the end of June. I thought the 80% is a good solid plug. Could be more, could be less. If it is more, you can see down below here, a few lines down, other funding source, excess prior year, Chapter 71. We have a Chapter 71 stabilization. So any overage that comes in, particularly on transportation, will go into that account, and it can only be used on transportation, and it's applied back to the towns the following year. So in this case, it'll be FY 28. If you look to the 24-25 budget, you'll see that's exactly what happened that year. It was 75% at the onset and landed at 95. That 340,000 was applied that following year. So that's how that happens. I'm hopeful that we see an overage there. If we don't, we cover it if it's less, but if it's more, you'll be getting that back in 28. Fee revenue, you'll see we doubled the amount there. We basically doubled all of our fees. Valley Tech there's 26 schools like Valley Tech in the state. We're one of only 2 that charges fees because the students do vast amount of work in the school and in the district. They usually generate about $500,000 a year. And so that dwarfs fees, but for parity, we basically have charged fees for a number of years, haven't changed them in a few years. So we thought that it was in the theme of everybody chipping in and helping. That includes the kids and the parents. So we doubled all of our fees.
Those fees cover sports as well. Is that column for sports and academics?
That would be sports, any kind of clubs, even parking, and whatever the whole fee structure we had, we basically doubled it. Okay. Next, investment income. I see that went down significantly. That's a function of the interest rates dropping. That's the good and the bad of interest rates dropping, but as a school that has a $10 million roof project coming up and we'll be going into a borrowing scenario, we welcome the lower rates, but that's the yin and yang of that. Other miscellaneous revenues simply are surplus equipment. So we auction all of that off on public surplus, and that's a fairly consistent number each year. Let's see. Excuse me, going down into member assessments, you see transportation, that's the remainder of the transportation cost for this coming year. Capital equipment is two things in there in that 106,000. It's firewall and switches to keep our computer systems up and maintained. Retiree medical, we had 13.25% increase in retiree medical last year, and we kept that flat. That's the projection we got. I'm a little honestly nervous about that one. I'm not sure I've seen much of anything that's been flat these days, but
Are you changing your coverage rates at all, or that's just what it is?
That's what it is. Remains the same. They're a GIC group unto themselves. So hard to gauge. We don't see these people very often. We hear about what's going on, let alone the extended family members that may be in that plan as well. So we remained at 13.25. That's our plug. We'll know the reality of that in July when we get the final bill. If we're off on that, we will have to cover the difference. Okay. Let's see. Minimum contribution is worth pointing out. You can see I shaded that 5.12% on the right. That number caught my interest this year as being a bit higher than normal. So typically that number is usually in the 3.5% range. So what that essentially entails or means is that the entire minimum contribution of the 13 towns increased by 5.12%. When I started at Valley Tech 29 years ago, the state paid roughly 60%. The member towns paid 40%, and that is the inverse today. This is precisely the mechanism that ratchets over the years, right, of the state doing a little less and the towns doing a little more. This year you can see 1.81% increase by the state and 5.12% by the towns. So that's why that got my attention. It's a little I'll say more brisker pace towards that ratcheting effect. I'll go into Mendon's minimum in a moment. Additional assessment is the plug. That's the differential we need when all is said and done to meet the final budget amount. We're able to reduce it 16% this year. It was, I think, 1.795 the prior year. And we really, that's a target for us to try to continue to reduce that. And we can do that until we start bumping into required net school spending, right? And we're not far off of that. Debt, there will be no debt in 27. The roof is moving right along as it should be. Of course, MSBA projects are wonderful. We're getting a 55% reimbursement on the roof, but they are great, but not known for being fast. So we are meeting all the deadlines. We did our bid opening. The bids came in within the expected range. So all thumbs are up and signs are green. This is designed to be a summer slammer project. So we're hoping this coming summer, everything stays on track. About 6 weeks of doing these 60,000 square feet of roof while it's unoccupied. So about 2 years worth of paperwork for a 6 week lits, but we're on track to do that.
And what's your borrowing plan for that? So I see short-term interest in here at 150. So is that your bands related to that project?
Correct. So we have, we'll be doing this with the bands and potentially GANs. We'll see what the mix is there. Our treasurer ultimately designs that plan. The second phase is the ventilation portion that is largely over that section of roof. So rather extraordinary ventilation where you have a welding shop, an engineering shop, 3 commercial kitchens, and an HVAC shop with about 15 boilers, right? So it's that is also simultaneously happening, but clearly after the roof. So there's a possibility that we won't be going long in 28 either. It might be 29, not promising that, but certainly giving you an idea here.
But you don't think the HVAC will happen for the next year?
And will be complete, correct. Roof, let's just say everything keeps running on perfect time here. Roof will be done this summer, then you start the ventilation. Will the ventilation be complete in 27 so that we can go long and consolidate all the bands? Honestly, I'm not sure. If anything, I've heard that that type of equipment has some delays associated with just obtaining it. So if it does, it's great. If that would be wonderful, because in the meantime, to Mr. Stoll's point, we basically service that it's only payments on the bands.
So would you go a second year of bands?
That's correct, right? So in this budget is $150,000 worth of debt service on the interest-only payments. There's also we paid $250,000 from E&D to do the schematic design and feasibility. So we're into it for $400 at the moment. I'd love to get it rolled over into the debt where it belongs, but we will do that as as time comes. If that makes sense.
Remind everyone, Mendon did not exempt that debt from Proposition 2.5, which we can do on the back end. So that's an open question when that expense hits the town.
Yep. Okay. Move on here.
I just open question for us or open question for the town?
Open question for whether the board wants to put that to a ballot
We can
question.
change our mind if we want to.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The open question for the board, which would then become.
Right, that's what
Page 8, full disclosure on excess and deficiency. I think you're all aware that schools like ours are allowed to, in fact, recommended to have excess and deficiency. It's not to exceed 5% of your annual town budget. You can see down below certified E&D as of January 16th is $1,384,579, which is 4.3% of our overall budget. You can also see we've continued this year and intend to continue the tradition of putting $200,000 to $250,000 towards the revenue side each year. We've done $250,000 this year and intend to continue that. We also have utilized D&D for, of course, any emergencies. We've matched grants with those because they make us more competitive to get those grants. We've also done capital improvement projects. For example, we have 2 science labs that need renovation and asbestos abatement, things like that. And we intend to continue as we have in years past. Always one-time expenses, never reoccurring expenses. So in full disclosure, the school committee intends to utilize up to $600,000 of that in FY27. Years past, we've been more in the 750 range. We're backing off of that a little bit. Clearly, we're in a cutting and savings type mode. So it's not the time really to be charging ahead with a lot of major projects and things. I also have a little concern that when we cut the budget this much, we may not generate that much excess and deficiency next year. We shall see.
Can I ask, how much of your budgeting process, and this is probably a hard question to answer, but in your department's minds, when they come to you, when they're talking about capital planning, how much of E&D is in their mind for that? Or are they really hands-off in their thought process?
Yeah, I would say that's not really in their wheelhouse.
They're just coming to you with a request, and it's pretty much lying on that committee to handle where it comes from.
Correct.
Question. Can you give some examples of how you've spent E&D money in the past 5 years?
Sure, sure. We've used it, you'll see a page coming up here with grants. Many of those have match requirements in them. So that would be one place. In the past 5 years, we've given at least 200 or 250,000 points of revenue for the following year. So you see that on the page 5 there. That continues. So that's the first bite off of excess and deficiency every year. It's right here under unreserved fund balance on page 7. Right, and then extraordinary maintenance or emergency repairs. So, for example, last year our hot water heater departed the earth, and we fixed that. And some of our capital improvement projects at the school, it's a long capital improvement plan, and we chip away at it as either our emergency or need dictates, or we get some kind of matching funding source that would allow us to make it more of a priority. So those types of expenditures.
Just quickly, you mentioned capital, and I know you talked about the transportation stabilization account gets funded by overages. Basically, you set a mark and then the state reimburses higher, it goes in there. So I understand why that revolves and kind of stays around zero balance over a couple 2-year period. What is your plan for funding the capital stabilization account?
So good question there. So also on page 8, you'll see the capital stabilization account. So we create that last year. There's really only one way to appropriate to it, and you see it as an entry on, for example, on page 7, there would be an appropriation to it. You can't just add to it throughout the year or things like that. So we have the account there. We're basically, it's created. We have no plans at the moment to appropriate to it.
But you'd see a line item in future.
You would see a line item, and then each town would share that by way of its operational ratio. Some people say, well, can't you just put E&D in it? You could, but here's the mechanism, and maybe Mr. Stull could back me up on this. I would say then do, for example, 350,000, right, and then appropriate 100,000. So effectively,
It's just a shell game.
it's a shuffle, all right. But that's the only way I could think of when somebody asked me, well, geez, couldn't you just move E&D into it? No, it has to be an appropriation. It's part of the budget, so you would be amending the budget if you ever did it another way. So you would certainly see that. And then on the other end of it, whatever we decided to do with it, we would need to come to the towns and ask for approval to spend it on whatever we declared it to be. So you would see it coming and going if that is helpful. And the last one's transportation there. We talked about chapter 71, obviously a zero balance, but hopefully our legislators will be generous with 71 and we'll get a little windfall for you for 28. Okay. Page 9, you see the breakdown by the towns. You'll obviously see Mendon there in the, there you go. Minimum contribution, you see is in white. Obviously, as you come across the Mendon line, you see 74 students, 74 over the 1,250 gives you a 5.92% operational ratio. Minimum contribution is set by Chapter 70 formula. This year you have one less student, but you have an increase in minimum contribution of $32,000. Our budget increase is ultimately, the total increase is also takes into account your transportation, capital equipment, and retiree medical, because they're not part of net school spending. So it's always in its separate column. And of course, the additional assessment is the plug to get to the remainder of the budget. The reason I shaded them that way is so that it's very clear to people that the minimum contribution we don't control, neither do you. That's what we both receive in mid-January with the cherry sheets. However, the rest of it is all driven by the operational ratio. So the transportation cost and the additional assessment goes by your operational ratio. So as a result, it actually cools off that rather significant increase of minimum contribution, you wind up with a 1.86% increase, or $28,061 over prior year. And that's with one less student. Okay, so our 2.5% budget, thing that's always hardest for me in explaining minimum contribution is that you can have all four permutations. You know, more kids, more money. You have more kids, less money. That usually is an easy sell, right? You can have less kids, less money, and that seems very logical. And then the ever dreaded less kids, more money. And so that's always throws people off. If you want to do a real deep dive on chapter 70, you and Mr. Stoll can sit down for about 2 days and go through the depths of.
That's fascinating.
It is.
Everybody's angry, everybody's aggrieved, no one likes it.
But it's like the long form of doing your taxes. If this, then minus 2.5%, and it's pretty interesting. Mendon does pay the highest. You're tied with Sutton. If you're a competitive group, you're tied with Sutton for the highest tuition. That's clearly not a selling point, but I think it's good for you to know. Your per pupil assessment is 20,752. And so I think you're pretty much at maximum effort. I don't think they can do much more to you than they're already doing in terms of your share. Of course, it's all calculated on what is formulaically an ability to pay. And keep in mind, it's relative to the other 12 partners. Okay. So that's where you stand in terms of this year's increase.
So this takes into account the fact that we are considered by the state, I wouldn't say considered by the residents, to be an affluent town.
Yeah, I've never looked at it quite that way. I always look at it relative to everyone else. So, you know, let's say towns on the lower end of the spectrum would be Milford and Millville, pay a much lower per pupil in minimum contribution anyway, than you do. So it's, you know, it's all of the equalized value of your property, and it's the tax, income tax of your residents multiplied by your municipal growth factor. And of
Which I
course,
try to minimize. That's one thing that we have control over. The other ones we don't control.
and then of course your number of students. And it's hardly straightforward, but it's all designed to, they'll show you charts and graphs that it is working perfectly.
All designed by them.
Right.
Yeah, I can say charts and graphs and tell you anything you want to hear.
Right, exactly. But that's the formula and what it does. So I've never looked at it like one town is wealthier than the other.
It's not pure wealth. It's
No.
more complicated.
Understood. So there is one less enrolled student. Does that include enrollments that are finalizing at the moment, or?
So your budget is always based on the prior October 1.
Yeah.
Right? So the admissions process that's happening now will affect FY28. Okay, so this is all based on a known, that's why they do it. It's the prior October 1 number, October 2025.
And that is not a BVT or a regional construct. That is how funding for school districts across the Commonwealth works, is the prior October 1st enrollment. So stop me if you're going to this.
No, go ahead.
So the recent lottery, which saw 19 Mendon students admitted, am I right? 19 students admitted for freshman class.
So yeah.
Would, you know, if we extrapolated that over 4 years, would lower the total number of students we have here. So that has no effect on our fiscal 27 assessment. It will have a minor effect on the fiscal 28 assessment. And then as that gets extrapolated out over the implementation of the apportionment lottery, will have effects on the assessment going forward. So like,
How many years is it being implemented over? Is it 4?
You're gonna see, now don't hold me to the hard number, but you're roughly gonna see -2 students for the next 6 to 8 years. All right, so you'll consistent. One thing that's nice for those who are in the financial planning end of things is at least this now has given you some stability, or at least I'll say predictability. How's that? It can still, float up or down a student because kids transfer and move from town to town.
But it's not gonna go up dramatically by 5 or 10.
It's definitely not going to go up. It's going to go down at a slow glide path.
So again, for the board, so the way the state implemented the lottery process is there is not an obligation for the district to do a town by town apportionment. BVT has decided to do this apportionment where it's you can obviously talk to it better than I can, but a function of your population, your 8th grade population, and as a portion of the 13 communities. So is that apportionment decision something that is either ratified or submitted to the state? Is that something that the school committee can backtrack on? Is that the plan for now, but maybe not for a total future?
So I did send out a video link. It's a riveting half hour if you got nothing to do. And I explained this all. It's about 25 minutes of how exactly we set up apportionment. To Mr. Stull's point, state didn't care. We didn't have to do anything, just spin that wheel and load it up. But we knew that that would create dramatically erratic results, town by town, year over year. I looked at it and I said, my God, I'll never pass a budget again. I'll be the shortest superintendent there's ever been. So we can't do that to the towns. We need something that makes sense. Step one, how big are the towns? So we looked at October 1, particularly the October 1 numbers of 8th graders in all 13 towns to get a relative size of each town that anybody can log in and see it, like the transparency of it. Okay, now you get a sense of how big each town is. Right? We did a 4-year rolling average also to smooth it out. So then the next thing was, well, what is your experience rate? What's your trend? How many kids have you been sending? Because some towns are way overprescribed and some are way under. There was no consideration of that in the old merit-based system. And so we took the enrollment trend and we put the two together and there's a delta. Now your delta is relatively small. You're off by about 15. If Grafton, they're underrepresented by 90. Milford down, or they need to send 70 more students. Grafton 90 more. Bellingham 40 something more.
What are you doing if those towns don't get that level of applicants to your school?
There's triple. There's no worry about that. Right.
Always have enough.
But then we said, well, wow, you the opposite too. Douglas minus 54. So we said, okay. Now let's slow it down. Let's do this over time. So for example, Grafton is looking at a plus 13 for the next 8 years in a row. That's a big bite, right? Consistent, but it's a big hill. And we just tried to make it more manageable, if you will, than shocking anybody with it. And we like that it's going to give you some predictability and stability from a, not only a budgeting perspective, but it also for Maureen and Jay, they know what's going to come to Valley Tech. That helps them educationally. So that's why we did it.
Can you give a 3-sentence explanation of how this new lottery system is more fair or works better than the old one?
No.
Okay. Good answer.
I can't be honest with you. And it's no secret that we were not in favor of this. And when I say we, not just Blackstone Valley Tech, but all of MAVA, which is the Mass Association of Oak Administrators. We fought this for 10 years because we knew that there would be a number of unintended consequences. The reason the argument or discussion took 10 years is because there was more than just a sense, there was data to back that up. It finally reached a point where they felt it was more fair to do it this way. And so we're doing it this way. We're just now with
the decision across all regional trait folk schools.
Anything with a chapter 74 in front of it shall be a lottery.
Okay.
And now we're just starting to see the data or the results, and you will confirm or deny all of those things that you were concerned were going to happen. Okay. But no, I can't tell you how it's.
Okay, I'm a newcomer on the FinCom.
Oh no,
that's why.
Yes, very good questions. Okay. One thing I just want to zip you to here Jay told me I had 8 minutes. I think I'm over.
You've exceeded, sir.
We will, 80 minutes.
Page 22, if I can skip you there. One thing I want to point out, we talked about that reduction in force. You see it there. Now the 8, who are the 8? That could be subject to change between now and the end of the year. What's not going to change is the commitment for the 650,000 that we're reducing. The reason I wanted to flip you to that, because when you look at series 1,000 through 7,000, you'll see it overall has an overall increase of 4.11%, but that is before you take the 650,000 out of it. Okay, so it's basically inaccurate. And I just wanted people to be aware of that it's not 4.11% over those series because it has not yet had the reduction in force applied to it. Okay. I told you I'd give you the details on page 23 is exactly what we cut, the 1.52 million to get down to 2.5%. There it is. One thing I point out on the page is down towards the bottom, the BVTI, that's our new adult program. It was just born in January. We started off with a great start with 108 adults who matriculated. So it's off to a very strong start. We did take $30,000 in cash. It generated more than that, but we took some cash from it. But the other notable thing here is that there were a lot of expenses that we were able to cut because the BVTI program pays for those. So the adult ed program has no cost to you. It's completely self-sustaining. It's a revenue generator. We're training adults in the evening, and they all earn 3 credentials in the trade that they're studying, and we match them with employment. So generates revenue, cuts expenses, does a great thing for an adult population trying to upskill or retrain. And the employers are also benefiting from it. So that was very helpful. I didn't want to take too much money from it because it's a baby and it's trying to grow, and I hope that it does.
Are you competing with like the other Blackstone Valley work programs or?
No. Our next closest competitor would be Assabet with their evening program. And I'm not sure what right now Tri-County might have running. Now, we already applied for the next round to add 4 more shops. So we have currently HVAC, plumbing, electrical, welding, machining. We're adding carpentry, culinary, auto tech, and auto body.
Is that 18 plus, or are the adults skewed towards another age range, or?
18 plus is the only requirement to that, right? We also have a whole number of courses that are not part of the trade stuff. So we have, yoga and flower arrangements, even for seniors, understanding your Social Security benefit. So a whole litany of, let's call them more like personal enrichment courses in addition to the heavy trade courses.
Is that another income opportunity for your staff, or do you hire out for that?
It's in or out. It's a mix, more out than in, because you'd be working a double shift every day, right? I almost prefer that it be out. You don't want to burn people out during the day. It's been a great opportunity. It's really something that we're really trying to grow this because it's a tremendous way to generate revenue and offset costs. So wish us well. The other thing I'll point out right under it, you see cosmetology productivity, auto tech productivity, culinary, etc. Those are the students' shop accounts where they generate a revenue, provide a service, for example, and so forth. Now, typically, we would spend those funds on guest speakers or field trips or things like that. We asked them this year if they would take that money and put it towards their own shop expenditures. So again, that theme of we're asking everybody to chip in. So of all of the cuts that we're making, it's if somebody asked me, well, what's your favorite one? I said, favorite one, I don't like any of them. But the thing I'm proudest of here is that you got the kids contributing to their own expenses for their programs. Now, we in fairness, said, we're not going to take your money and put it in the general fund. So if it's from the auto tech productivity, we're going to pay for auto tech expenses with it. It makes it a little more palatable, but very, very, proud of everybody really coming together to do what they can here to reduce. 24 is our current grant standing. This was printed February 17th, about 2.5 million now. I should point out the in-kind donations. We're really ramping up to go for more of those. So as we reach out to our business partners, they're far more likely to give us an in-kind donation of equipment or supplies than they are to give us, cash or things of that nature. So we started tracking that separately this year. And the last, second to last page there, it's just to show you where Valley Tech stands in relation to our 25 sister schools. We've always been at the top of the bottom third. We've been as low as fifth on this list. You see there's a lot of compression there. A lot of schools in the 25s range, for example, there. But it was interesting. Somebody said, I don't know, why did you put this in here? That's terrible. And I said, well, it is what it is. I thought it was pretty good, but we all have opinions. But it's, I think, worthwhile, I'll say, in transparency for you to know it, just where we kind of land with relation to the others. You also have to be careful what you wish for. Assabet Valley, way up there at the top, they're a minimum contribution school. So, it doesn't just because it doesn't mean you're going to get your per pupil down. Again, that's more of that Chapter 70 formula and who comprises your student body and things like that. But it's just good for you to know where we stand. One thing I think is important is that the state expects us to be 1.5 to twice as expensive as a regular education, and we're 1.25 of the average within the valley. So that's meaningful to us that we try to do, again, an excellent job with your kids and do it for a reasonable expenditure. So
Is that because of you doing more with less, or because you're more efficient at how you handle?
I think it's the whole combination. So, you got to be efficient at it. You can't be wasteful. You're looking at a number of ways to generate revenue that's not, hitting the assessment. And, it's all of the above.
That's going to continue to be your target for the foreseeable future, is to stay as reasonable as possible.
Yeah, well, we talk a lot about said target, and I kind of got a reality check because we're getting awfully close to required net school spending. So I looked at it and said, wow, wouldn't it be great if, it came in here and I said, hey, here's the minimum contribution. I can't charge you any less than that. And we'll go raise the rest of the money ourselves. Thanks. Have a good night. But I realized that may not be as possible as I once thought, because as you approach required net school spending, if you go below it, you get penalized. They'll take your Chapter 70 money away from you. And if you continue to do that, they'll actually punish you and fine you for doing that. So it's like, okay, so you're going to reach almost like this hover point, and we're not that far off of it. So the dream never dies, though. I'd love to be the absolute best voc tech school and do it as inexpensively as it can be done, i.e. to me, that's efficiency. And we get excited about that. I just realized that there's some limitations that I didn't think we were that close. We're closer than I thought. I'm gonna realize that this year, like easy. So on the last page, you have 2 regional schools, so that everything in here is an all-in expense. It's one night, so you know that already.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Does anybody have any trailing questions, Carl?
Yep, back on page 23. The second largest way that you reduced money was collective bargaining agreement offset. Could you refresh my memory on what that means?
Yes, that's the 000 agreement that we came up with. We had a placeholder in our budget for 11% over 3 years. When we removed our placeholder and put in our actual negotiated contract, it was $323,000 less than we thought we were going to have to spend. And that was based on the trend, on the norm. And it grows each year. So as I said, in year 2, it'll be more like 700. And in year 3, we get the real payoff at 1 million.
And just to be clear, the bargaining unit is still gonna move through the steps. It's just those numbers, that 000 is just a COLA.
That's correct.
So they're all gonna,
They all step.
assuming they're all not at the top of their steps and lanes, it's still in the step. It's still
Yes.
raised, but it's just, they're not taking any cost of living adjustment.
That's right. I did calculate it. Tell me if you think I'm up there. I believe that the salary and wage increase was 1.25%. Does that sound right to you?
You adjust all the steps and lanes on.
Correct, correct. So in other words, our actual cost year over year, we're increasing about 1.
The average increase of all of the bargaining unit people is about 1.7 per year. Is that when you said that it's?
What I'm saying is we actually said, oh geez, that's nice and all. How much is salary and wage more next year than this year? And it was 1.25 roughly, if my memory serves.
It's different per member of the bargaining based on.
Oh, sure. You could be in,
But that's the, no, but
that's the average. Yeah.
And you don't know lanes. People can come up with, by the way, now I got my master's degree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So on the 650 that I asked about before, so on
Yes.
page 23, you said your initial budget request was 34.5 million.
Yes,
And then here's all these reductions that total 1.5 million to get you down to 33.
yes,
And incorporated in that is 650.
correct.
And then I see the 650 again on page 7 as a reduction in force. Is that without like really drilling into it? I guess initially it seems double counted. Can you kind of explain why it shows up twice?
Oh, I know why it shows up twice, because normally what you would do, Mr. Stahl, is it would have been subtracted from each one of these series, right? 1,000 through 7,000. And we did not do that because we haven't committed to who they are. And so we still had to show accuracy to the budget. So we added the line for the reduction in force at the bottom, because otherwise our total wouldn't be accurate.
So all right, so the 650 is a positive in your 1,000 through, 3,000.
1,000 through, yeah,
2,000.
you got it, right.
Whereas everything else that's shown on page 23 is already incorporated in their respective line items on page 7.
It's all been correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So how's employee morale about the reductions in 000 youth contract? Are they resigned, angry, or okay with it? Because that's where 2/3 of your reduction is coming from on the staff.
As I said, nobody's happy about it. So I wouldn't give you that impression. They all pay close attention. Of course, I tell them. You just had a faculty meeting the other day, annually do the state of the district address. They're well aware that I'm not sure there's a single school district out of our 11 that isn't reducing force. They have no expectation that everybody else is going to go through that. It's not going to somehow magically be BVT's reality. So they're aware of that. They're very engaged in a cause and effect relationship, that the more they can do to reduce costs, the less, I'll say, you suffer from those types of reductions. Of course, it creates nervousness and everything else. Oh God, I hope it's not me. That kind of thing. But no, I would say that they're very strong, ironically, a strong esprit de corps. That they appreciate that, if we weren't able to work together, it would be a whole lot worse. And that's the right attitude.
So going back to Jeremy's math question, the FY27 initial budget request, 34,551,752. Where from page 7 should I be able to add up numbers to get to that? Because if I do the 1,000 through 7,000 expenses, add in 8,000 to 9,000 as well, and don't take into account the reduction in force, that's $870,000 short from the 34,551,752.
Are you working on page 7?
I'm looking at page 7 in relation to 23, and I'm just trying to figure out where that 34.5 number comes from.
If I understood his answer, the 650 is not baked into the constituent line items on 7, but the balance of the items are baked into the individual line items. So the collective bargaining agreement offset of 323 is already baked into the budget request for 1,000, 2,000, et
I
cetera.
didn't reduce the.
Whereas the 650 is not baked in because that would call out the individuals that are pink slip possible.
Correct.
Right, yeah, so, but if you didn't take out you put a line through the 650 here in the page 7 budget, right?
Mhm.
And you added everything up, that total at the bottom is going to come out to
33,680.
yeah, right, which shouldn't that be the 34?
So take the 150. All right, I'm doing it.
Could I jump in and help you guys understand this
Yes.
a little bit? So page 7 is the final bottom line budget that lands at 33,031,281. When you look at page 23, that was the initial department request at the 34,551,762. You will not see that on page 7 because page 7 is the final number. Page 23 is just displaying how we got from the 34.5 million down to the 33 million at the very bottom, which is the number you'll see on page 7 because that's the final budget.
Okay.
Does that help?
It's always great to bring your business manager with you. Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
All right, last chance to talk to BVT about their budget. We really appreciate the very detailed presentation, and every time we get a packet, we are happy about it. And I want to say that every time because often many of us go home and look through this later again and we reference it and we go over the budget. So this is great. So appreciate the students putting this together and appreciate you guys coming out to talk to us and dealing with all our detailed questions.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'll let Dr. Fitz know about the 100th.
Yes. Thank you.
We can,
Thank you. Nice job.
zap us out of here. There we
Yeah,
go.
you're all out.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Would you like me to leave this chair for them?
Sure.
Yeah.
We don't want to do that, TJ.
All right, next up, we'd like to invite the Mendon Upton Regional School District to talk about their 2027 budget. We're running low on mints.
Thank you.
What about chocolate? I mean. Oh, usually I pay for the mints.
I know.
They put it in the budget this year.
Oh, that was.
Like, if that's where it comes out. All right, so do you guys have a presentation?
Yeah.
Are you joining our meeting? I'm just delaying while we wait for our TA to come back.
Yeah,
You want me to share my screen, I take it? Can do
I
that?
mean,
I
you
have,
can talk without visuals if you'd like.
I don't know what window I want. Gotta be that one there.
I just see dollars going from one bucket to another bucket. If you don't put them up there, it's just like a cartoon, so.
Okay. Oh, I know what I need to do first. Hang on. Get to the presentation. If you guys want to do my email instead. I don't know why. There we go. Right? You want us to hang on a second? Is that it?
So you can get going.
Okay.
everybody, thank you so much for having us and giving us another opportunity to share a little bit about our budget. I know we had our multi-board meeting and we've had some revisions or some information that's the same information from that presentation. I know some of you were at our budget hearing, so thank you for coming to that, or maybe you watched online. We have some slides adapted from that. We took that was an hour-long presentation, and we condensed it. But what we have are all of those slides. So if you have questions, say about a revolving account or something else, we can always go to those slides. But we're going to be focusing on some key messages. So in summary, what we'll be talking through are some key takeaways that we've been sharing at multiple meetings in both towns, that we're going to focus a little bit on some of the highlights about our district. We're going to talk about how we're in a perfect storm right now with fixed costs accelerating faster than local revenue. We're at this breaking point where we've bridged the growing gaps. We've had reductions, reallocations, and grants and increased use of reserves over the last number of years. But this year we have some significant cost drivers that we'll speak to, or you might already be aware of. We'd like to highlight just where the state's at right now. And I know you'll have a lot of people, referencing how the state's not going to save us with their funding, nor will the federal government right now. And the MURC budget is needs-based budget. So we'll talk a little bit about our priorities for that. And that we've been just sharing that it's a local choice of kind of what path that people will pursue in this. So we are an exceptional district. Some people talk about their districts as good to great. I'd like to think that we're exceptional and better than good, better than great. And can I touch your?
Sure, you drive. You're the superintendent.
I want to go quickly through some of these because they've seen some of them. So we have this great picture. We're trying to increase our engagement, but we are focusing on investing, and a lot of investments have had an impact at every grade level. We have incredible athletics and band and performances, and we have lots of people winning awards recently. So I'll talk a little bit about that. We just brought in Boston Dynamics, and we're having partnerships and learning about robotics. So you can see all the great excitement taking place. All I can say is, like, if you do, the statement, like, what's the state of the district, right? It's the best that I've ever seen right now. We are excelling, and we want to continue to do so. Part of it is we're driven by our strategic priorities. A lot of districts will have pieces of paper that have their strategic priorities. We really live our strategic priorities and our action steps that we revise and renew every single year. We're in year 3 of our current strategic plan. And a lot of our activities, engagement, you see, are focused on deeper learning, authentic learning, engaging our students, getting them outside of the classroom, bringing people into the classroom. That's been a big focus for us. Also, investment in high quality curriculum instruction is having a big impact on our learning, and we're seeing results. Let's see if I got this to work. We have been awarded many grants. We have Liz Garden, who was just named the Massachusetts Elementary Principal of the Year. We have the AD of the Year right now with Chris Schmidt, and our students are constantly being recognized. And I try to, at every one of my school committee meetings, just give highlights on that because it's constant, and put it into all my newsletters that go out to families so they're aware of what's happening inside our district. One area, when we go back, and some of you have been sitting around this table and we presented in the last number of years, and we've had some strategic investments in different positions. This is a good example of results that we're starting to get. We had high quality investment in high quality instructional materials in math. We're seeing math achievement. We've been recognized by the state by going to pre-pandemic levels and being above many school districts, and have been asked to present and share. And we've been studied at our elementary level of how we're actually making this fast improvement. But it's been some of this investment in, like, iReady, which is an assessment tool, adding assistant principal, instructional coach in the last few years. Something else we're noticing, we're really focusing on our ELA, and we brought in some high quality instructional resources and added 1 position in our 5th grade to have more time on learning, less transitions, and that's had an impact within the last year or so. And we're pretty pleased with our continued growth, and a focus area for us in writing. And the 3rd area is in chronic absenteeism, is something that is across the nation and Massachusetts, and with a lot of our counseling supports and some programs we put in with our additional counselors we've had in the last few years, we're seeing some great results. Those are just a couple quick highlights. Like Anthony said, we could go all day about all the great things happening, but I just think it's important to make the connection between the numbers in the book to the results that we're getting, especially as they're aligned to our strategic priorities.
What's ELA?
ELA, English Language Arts, like English, English, yeah.
English and art,
Literacy.
both days.
Yeah.
I want to just commend you on this very impressive absentee rate drop.
Thank you.
Really excellent job. That's,
Yeah, and so one of our additional counselors at the high school, like we've been looking specifically at data with some of our data systems, but also they developed a program in order to work on getting students to school. And then they also added in some, trying to think what it's called, I think a launch program for our freshmen coming in and more connections as they're transitioning into the high school from middle school. They've really been working hard at it, so thank you.
Yeah.
So we'd like to highlight with school choice that school choice is a place that we bring in revenue. We've been trying to, my goal was to get it back to pre-pandemic levels, and we're back at that. The blue are the number of students coming into the district and the red are the number of students going out of the district. And I'm trying to keep it as consistent as I can at that level. But we have to turn people away. Just like BBC just mentioned too, we have to turn people away who want to come to our district because of its reputation and they, hear great things about it. And we just have the certain number of spots that we try to fill in order to maintain this. But this is a good trend and just want to point that out as well. I'm hitting your buttons. Sorry. Oh, but yeah. Sorry.
You were doing well there.
I'm doing great.
Oh, slideshow, go back.
Couldn't have a Mac.
No, can't have a Mac. That's right.
All right.
So I just want to point out, so this year, your kiddos choicing in was the highest it's been
Yeah.
in the decade.
Yeah.
And those leaving is the lowest it's been in a decade.
Yeah.
And it's important to point out the red, the people leaving, we pay for those regardless of whether we're a choice district or not.
Yeah.
Hit the down arrow here.
does that count BBT in that leaving? Okay,
No, these are just kids
totally out of the system.
maybe go to Hopedale or Grafton or Milford or anywhere.
Yeah, and sometimes it might be just like we have teachers here that, they want to have their students come here. We might have the opposite, they live somewhere else or, so that happens too, but.
Like on charter schools?
No.
Yeah, we do have a charter school slide.
Yeah,
We are
okay.
going to get to that. Yeah, because that's an important.
I forget, I've only seen it twice.
Yeah. I know, someone the other day said, well, this is the 5th time I've seen you present
Yeah.
this. I'm like,
You guys
great,
could
you
do it
could
for
start
us.
presenting. Yeah, so we kind of describe it as a perfect storm. We've had this image just from the beginning, so we've seen it, that just to point out kind of the trend of the accelerating costs, and we'll talk a lot. I talk with my hands a lot sometimes, so, but I always go, we have this increasing fixed cost scenario that I know you're all aware of. Something that I tried to emphasize in the last few years, if you remember the guy standing over the cliff when I gave the presentations, this is the cliff, the structural gap has been growing, and these are some of the reasons for that. This was the slide a year ago that we had, and we tried to mark that. We know the last couple of years, like there were implications at some point we would be at where the gap is too large for us. And we'll talk more about how big it is this year. We really do want a message to be how much we do. I heard Anthony talking about a lot of efficiencies, et cetera. We focus on efficiencies, all of my departmental presentations every year. So you can go and see all the efficiencies. We always have reductions every year. We always look to reallocate staff every year. We go after every grant possible.
I think it's,
Is it dying?
yeah, we're losing
We
charge.
need power, we got power.
Yeah, I just can't crawl under the table unless you want me to stay here for the week. Yeah, I think I need to use my own charger.
Got one of those Lenovo pads with
No,
the.
Oh,
This has the DC adapter, but it will also take power.
I think that's power. I think that's it.
All right.
No, that's not power.
It's not power?
Power's on the back.
All right, I'll keep
That's it.
talking though. Does that work? Well, figure. It's just a snapshot of some of the reductions, reallocations, efficiencies that we've had over the last 3 or so years. We have that going back, especially since I've been here. Yeah, that worked.
Yep.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, but we want to emphasize that we've been trying to extend to this point as much as we can by coming in with level services, only a couple of strategic investments or needs-based over different years, and lots of reductions, reallocations of staff throughout. But we have many key cost drivers that are fixed that we'll speak to. I'm going to hand it over to you, Jay, on this
Okay.
one.
All right, so if we break out our budget by the various categories, about just under 78% of our costs go to the people that work in the district, salaries, employees, benefits, all those things. Benefits is not just health insurance, it's also Medicare, tax, Worcester retirement, all the various things that are the costs for having employees in a school district or any business. Our main drivers for this year, we've talked about this before, health insurance is fairly substantial. Budgetarily, it's showing up as a 32% increase. That has to do with funding in this current year and the growth in the budget from this year to next year. Our premium increase is 23% for next year. What I always say is it's not so much the percentage, because that sounds like an alarming high number, but it's the actual premium. So I've done some research as to what our premiums will be next year compared to some other districts, and they're still going to be lower than most places, but it's a substantial increase in our budget. Salaries are up 1.5 million, a little over 6%, and special education, that's out of district tuitions for the most part. We're projecting a potential of at least 6 more kids going out next year. And that's a little over $1 million. So you put all that together, that's about 81% of the increase we're looking at for next year in just those 3 areas.
Can I just ask, because I'm sure it's going to be asked of me, that the salaries that are up 6%, over 6% from the current fiscal year to the next fiscal year, is that again because of steps and lanes?
Steps, lanes, yeah, steps, lanes, and COLAs. So there's 3.
Which is basically teachers improving themselves.
Correct. Correct. We do have a substantial number of teachers at top step, but anybody that's down in the lower steps, you're getting a step increase, potentially a lane increase if they've got an advanced their degree status, and then a COLA applied to all of it. So it's all 3. All right. This is more detail about the main drivers in the budget. We talked about the first 3. We've got about 5 new positions in this budget. We have some curriculum that we need to purchase. It's the reading ELA program for elementary schools.
And middle.
And
It's
middle.
K to 8, yeah.
Oh, it's K to 8,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And that's because nowadays curriculum is digital. You get a 6-year license. When the license expires, you've got to renew it. We got a little bit of utility costs going up. That's mostly oil, gas, electricity. Unfortunately, that doesn't count the recent oil spikes that have happened now. So we'll probably have to deal with that. I was hoping that I'm hoping oil will go down by the fall. You never know. Worcester retirement, we got a similar increase that I think the town got, and about $127,000. Transportation, we renegotiated our contract. We had an optional 2-year extension. In order to do that, we asked them to reduce the prices, which they did. Health insurance is the biggie, though, and that's what everybody talks about. Almost everybody in municipalities are finding that their budgets were not appropriate for what the healthcare cost is. And healthcare is driven by claims. We're in a self-funded plan similar to the town. It means that you pay 100% of your claims. What you don't pay in the plan we're in is you don't pay the profit margin that, say, Harvard Pilgrim wants to make. And we get the rebates for prescriptions and stuff like that, where in a fully insured plan, you don't get that. We did reach out to Blue Cross Blue Shield, Mass Brigham Health. They said, we will not provide you with a quote. We're not interested because you have too many high claims. Harvard Pilgrim said, sure, you can go back to the kind of plan that's fully insured. It'll only be 38% as an increase without the GLP-1s. Our plan is eliminating GLP-1 drugs as of July 1 for weight loss only. The GLP-1s were designed for other things than weight loss. That will still stay in effect. You can see we've had a big growth in 26 and 27 in our health insurance. I don't think we're uncommon. I think you'll find that health insurance is a driver in just about every district and community around the state.
Something to point out, though, is it's been pretty flat for a while.
Right.
And
You can see, we went for several years fluctuating back and forth. In the last 2 years, we've had fairly dramatic increases. Out of district tuition, you can see we're projecting 22 students. We currently have 16 this year, but that's an increase in that cost. That's for tuition and transportation costs. Transportation can vary anywhere. To send one student where you have to hire a van can be as much as 400 hours a day or more, 500 hours a day. It just depends on where they have to go. And again, these are not challenges that are unique to us. This is something that's going on pretty much everywhere. If you just open up, watch the news every morning, you'll hear about another district that's either cutting or looking for additional funding in some fashion. Want to talk about this
Yeah,
one?
I can do this one. So we've been advocating at all of our superintendent roundtables, and I'm a rep for the Worcester Roundtable and also Tri-County because we kind of cross over both. And so this was from the Worcester County presentation, but where it's really definitely hit in Worcester County. But you have the hold harmless where our aid is flat. If we start in that part, if you go to the next part in the cycle, we have the costs that are going up. It leaves districts to, the only thing you can really do is to cut services. If you cut too many services, then people leave the district and you become a district that's in this competitive disadvantage. Families start to choose to go somewhere else. Then you have less students where you get less money. And then the cycle, it's hard to get out of that cycle. And a good example, and I'm good friends with Amy over in Northbridge, the superintendent there, but they had a couple failed overrides, and most of our students that come in from school choice are coming from places like Northbridge, where you start to also have the spiral of students leaving for school choice and choicing elsewhere. Then you don't have that amount of money coming in, and it actually it's a bigger hole that you start to dig out of. And this is at all of the roundtables. I've seen what people have been talking about for superintendents in different regions, and it is across the whole state.
Is anybody breaking the cycle? Is there anybody being successful in this space?
It's I think if communities just decide to do two different things, right? Either some are just flat out like reduce. And then others, they just have a plan. They continue to, it might be an operational override at a certain point and continue to invest and plan forward. So like Arlington does that every 5 years. I think it was Brooklyn. We're telling this right every 3 years. And so I live in Grafton. So every 5 years they're coming forward, or 5 or 6 years. And it's like planning it out. And then you don't have as significant of cuts, but others it's, straight up cuts, or if it doesn't go through. So for us, we're advocating for we're being as fiscally responsible as we can, and to keep, making reductions as needed and do that. But at some point, the math doesn't add up when you get hit with the types of costs we've had.
Well, it seems like at some point your educational system collapses.
Yeah.
So this district, I mean, we in 2010 had substantial cuts because we didn't have the revenue, and we started to slowly return. But the last override that was, that came forward was in FY16, but 2015. That's what boosted us up and has sustained us through to 2026. So it took us, I'd say, 10 years to recover from the cycle when we started the downward spiral.
And so I've been in the district since 2013. And although it feels like,
So when
like in a good way. And but so I have been able to see when we were just starting to build things back, and then had the override, and then continue to build things back, and then we manage things with additional grants around the COVID time. But when I say we're in a really positive culture and great place, and what we're putting forward are just needs-based kind of positions and target for strategic priorities here and there, but we're really moving and grooving. So hoping to keep it that way. That's the plan. So some of the state trends, these were all for many of these presentations, but across the state, special education costs have risen about 29% since 2021 alone, and it's been pretty unsustainable for many district budgets. They just had a massive transportation study that just got released in the last month. It's on our website if you're into reading research reports. If I have some, I throw them in there. But this is out of that regarding the transportation costs that are increasing. And then when we receive the reimbursement from circuit breaker, the cost burden's really outpacing the state reimbursements that we're getting. We'll talk a little bit more about circuit breaker, but just give you a sense of like the larger picture that's impacting us and other districts as well.
All right. So we have several buckets that have revenue. Obviously, we go for as many grants as we possibly can. We do fairly well with grants. Some of them are entitlement grants, some of them are competitive. District revenue is money that comes out of our budget, mostly from E&D and a couple other revenue creating or generating systems. State aid is fairly low. As far as percentage, you can see Mendon and Upton are the two biggest chunks. The state, to answer the question about whether we're affluent towns, yes, I do believe the state looks at Mendon and Upton as affluent towns. If you remember the whole target share discussions years ago, where we were trying to get to target share, the top target, the cap is 82.5%. That's where Mendon and Upton currently are. There's 191 communities that are at that level. So the state says
In the middle.
we were at like 68% way back, like 15 years ago. State aid, chapter 70, we get regional transportation reimbursement. As Dr. Steele said, it's based on FY25 costs. So we get reimbursed for what we spent for reimbursable amounts in 25 in 27. So there are 2-year lag behind that. Obviously it costs more in 27. Then we do get, go back, charter school. We do have students. Everybody needs to understand if a family in Mendon or Upton wants to go to a charter school, Mendon Upton is paying the bill. And we get a reimbursement rate anywhere from about 10 to 20%. It's 23% projected for next year, but those numbers change. So when we will know the final cost for charter school and the final reimbursement will be sometime at the end of June of 2027.
Is this per charter? Sorry.
Yeah.
Is it per charter school, that rate, or is it charter schools?
Charter schools in general.
Oh,
It's
so you
being
get
assessed.
reimbursed, doesn't matter how much.
Yeah, I
the
can't tell you I know how many kids are going. It's 19 kids that are going between the two towns, and we're going to be assessed a little over $400,000. We're going to be reimbursed at about 95,000, which is about 23%. So here's,
On transportation, Jay.
what's that?
On transportation or regional transportation. So the state says they'll reimburse 100%.
Well, that's what the law says, subject to appropriation, which is the caveat on how you get out of paying for something. So you guys cannot do that at the town meeting. Nothing, you're going to appropriate there. You can't take it off, subject to change. All right, chapter 70, you can see we're going to get $142,000 based on the initial budget released by the governor. It's based on $75 per student. We're a minimum aid district, so state law says the minimum is 30. This current year it went up to 150. The previous year was 103. I'm hoping this, I think I read that the House's budget was coming out next week. We'll see what the House budget is. But either way, even if it went to 150, that would give us another $142,000. It's not going to close a $4 million gap. Transportation, we're going to get an extra $20,000 and another $21,000 in charter. So our net state aid is up $185,000, a little under 1.25%. Over the last since FY16, the last 11 years, our rate of growth in state aid is less than 1%. It's not a lot. You can see the reimbursement on transportation. Yes, it's gone up a little bit, but so as the costs go up and the reimbursement is not keeping pace with the cost. Again, it's just the nature of the game at this point. Here's the charter school piece. So we got 19 students projected to go. We have 19 this year, but it's another $40,000 next year for those 19 students. Reimbursement's going up a slight amount.
You can kind of note how it's going up, the cost, but the numbers of students
Right.
are pretty stable.
Right, but if you look at like FY25, the reimbursement ended up being 14.2%.
If I remember correctly, in the multi-board meeting, you had talked about wanting to do these investments to try to claw some of those students back.
Well,
right?
People, parents make choices on where they want their children to go to school. And if they feel that the school district that they have that they can go to for nothing isn't what they want, they're going to pick an alternative. And a charter school is another one that doesn't cost them anything, but it does cost somebody. Same as BVT. I mean, the town is going to pay if they want to go to BVT, they're going to look for alternatives. And that's part of the cycle that you get in when you don't have a district that's funded well and you don't have the services that kids need.
I did look into the numbers here because I was curious, and some are families, so you have a family.
One siblings goes.
3, 4 kids.
That makes sense.
And then,
Right.
so it's not 19 individual different families making the choice. That somehow made me feel a little better, but it also made me more curious, right? Of, why choosing other options and not us.
I'm sure as soon as you lose one sibling, you lose.
Choice kind of works the same way. And same for choice in. Sometimes we do accept siblings. We try to prioritize them.
Right. That's
So it would be common, okay, they're doing great here. I want my other child to go there as well.
2 slides ago, sorry, Jay, you're on your transportation. So transportation is notoriously uncompetitive. What's your transportation like? Do you have?
The company we work with, or we're contracted with, is Telstone and Sons. We've had them for at least the last 15 years. We have never had more than one bid in the last 15 years. I don't anticipate it. There are some national companies that will come in and bid on a local job, but for the most part, they're not competitive with the smaller local companies, and they all know each other, so they're not going to bid against, I'm friends with this company. I'm not going to take their work from them because I can basically handle what I have. So Telstone does 3 districts: Douglas, Blackstone, Millville, and us. So we've had no competition whatsoever. And that's why when you do the 2-year optional extension, you could go out to bid again, but Telstone's going to bid and they already know what the extension is. So they're not going to really do much, and nobody else seems to be competitive. And they've done a great job. I have no complaints about them, but the cost is what the cost is.
I think there's a study on that too.
Yeah.
If I go and find it, I can put it on the
Yeah.
website, but there's a whole study on that.
I wasn't gonna say all that, but
Yeah.
that's what I was getting at. Yes.
Yeah. Good study.
All right, your local aid is considered the minimum local contribution determined by the state based on foundation formula. It is a very complicated formula that, quite honestly, it is what it is. Transportation net of state aid is the difference between what we pay for total cost of transportation and what we get reimbursed from, and that's required by the regional agreement. Operation additional is discretionary money that the town provides to us. It's primarily funded from prior overrides over the years. There have been, I don't know how many in Mendon and Upton, but there have been a few. Enrollment percentages have been pretty stable, about a 1% swing back and forth. You can see the 27 enrollment has gone up about 0.25%. So these are the numbers for Mendon right now, which I know you've all seen or probably have heard about. It's looking at about a 21% increase in order to fund all these various things, and we can talk about various ways to do that. Minimum contribution is what it is. Transportation is there. These are Upton numbers, which we presented to the Upton Select Board a couple of weeks ago. Annual growth rate over the last 11 years for Mendon has been a little under 1.6%. Upton has been 2.6. There were a couple of years, you can see, I believe it was 24 and 26 this current year, where there was a $0 increase from 25 to 26. And that's because of how the formula calculates the minimum contributions, and the balance is done by enrollment splits. But the bottom line is, if one town says, we can give you an extra 600,000, and the math means that the other town is at 0, that's where the town can't. We have to keep within that formula of the enrollment percentage. There is some capital debt this year. We have borrowed about $9 million toward all the projects that were approved last year. The next borrowing we will do will be sometime in the next fiscal year, and it will be a band, because we'll do bands for the rest of the project and then borrow for the remaining amount when we have to. We did this borrowing here mostly because the interest rate was relatively good, and we felt like it was a better opportunity to get it in a good rate. The interest rate I believe we're paying is 3.7%, and the money was then put in a bank account that's earning 4%. So we can take that money and invest it into the project. That will help a little bit.
And we don't have any slides on the capital projects
They're all
in
on.
here, but after, when we get to questions, if you want us to give you some of the updates, we're more than happy to do so. We do put out info on our website too, on the update page.
All right, our budget over the last 11 years has gone up on average of about 2.6% compounded average. Again, it's been fairly modest. I feel like we've managed to do fairly well and not asking for additional money from the towns and managing our resources well. But obviously this year we've kind of hit the wall or hit that cliff. And I'll turn it back to Maureen, and we'll keep going.
So kind of ended out, just give you a few highlights about what's in the budget and the needs-based budget development process. We always have budget principles. We adapt them every year. Oh, can you go to, sorry, that's me. All right.
The down arrow.
Get down there, I'll do my best. We're focused obviously on what's best for students and our priorities for our students and our programming. We're focused on needs-based foundations this year and maintaining we always begin with level services, but sometimes we have to invest in certain needs-based areas. And then we're really, I just want to say it again, I say it every meeting, trying to be as transparent as possible about the budget, and everything's on our website. All the videos are on our website. We're more than happy to answer questions at any point. Obviously we will tonight, but for anyone watching, we want to make sure.
More presentations.
What I do keep offering to do presentations. speaking and presentations. As part of the process, we've had probably, I don't know, 18, I don't know how many we've had so far, but a lot. We're presenting every night and happy to do so. So when we are setting up our budget options, the last few years we've been, I just kind of point out where we're at for the type of budget we're coming forward. We've been just above that line last year. We had to make some reductions in order to, get through last year, and we're kind of hovering at that line of level service. We always begin, that's the floor, to maintain our services and class sizes and programs for our students that need to be provided. And then we have critical needs that come up, I'll speak to in a minute. And every once in a while, we're able to get to that strategic and competitive level and to keep moving ourselves forward. We never want to fall into the full reduced service budget area below, because that would be regression for our students and cuts in services. We have a couple goals that we're tackling with our positions. One is to continue to maintain effective class sizes. So at Clough Elementary School, we have it's our current grade 2, but heading into grade 3. Class sizes that are at about 25. And with our class size numbers, this is above what is considered to be best practice at that grade level. We want it to be lower, closer to that 19, 20, max 22 range. And so therefore, this is one of the positions that has been proposed. And on goal number 2, for special education teachers, we have made, when I talked about making reductions in past years, I don't know if you recall, we had this smaller bubble, we call it a student class that went through the middle school, and they just entered the high school, where it was significantly smaller class. As they went through, we did different reallocations and made reductions because we didn't need those positions. But now we're at a point with students coming up that we need to bring back. It's particularly the number one, if I can only have one position, and I say this in every presentation, it's that middle school special education teacher, because it's a compliance issue for our students on IEPs and meeting deadlines and meeting their needs. We are short with the number of people that we have there. And because of the way the schedule is at the high school, when we made a reduction at the high school, what we're finding out is it's been difficult to meet some of the personalized scheduling needs of some of our students that are now at the high school. So that's why those are in the budget. For our school psychologists, we have 2 school psychologists. What they do right now are evaluations, and if anyone is coming forward and requesting an evaluation, it's jumped from when last year 71 to about 100 this current year, and they do all the psychological testing and assessments, cognitive and academic testing, and they are amazing people doing amazing things, but they don't have enough time in the day in order to meet the number of assessments that are coming through. And so a recommendation was to add another school psychologist. In doing so, right now, all they're doing are the assessments. You would also be able to, you'd reduce the assessments across. Here I am using my hands. And then they can then provide some direct service to kids as well, because they have a higher level of expertise than.
Is that shared staff or?
Yeah, they go across buildings. Yeah. And so it would actually help with social emotional learning and support and mental health supports for direct service as well. But the primary first reason is the numbers, it's too much for them. And lastly, we have an English language teacher request. This came from 3, I have each department kind of ground up, tell me what they need. And this came from 3 different places, because we have shared, right now we have 4 buildings and 3 EL teachers, English language teachers. They work with our multilingual students. And they now, because of the scheduling, all the schedules are different in the buildings. They have to sometimes pull students out of their core instruction. We call that tier 1 instruction, which you don't want to do, in order to provide their mandated services for the students to teach them English. And this is mandated by the state based off of when you get assessed, when you come in as a student. I'm probably giving you too much information now, so I'll try not to go on for too much, but you get assessed when you come in. So let's say you're and you just moved to the country and you don't speak our language, don't speak English. you need to have a higher number of minutes per day per week with an English language teacher for this instruction. And we're just not able to meet the minutes of our students, and with 3 being shared across, and we're losing time with the travel as well to meet their needs. With them having 1 per building, it's really going to help us out too, because then they can also push into classrooms and provide additional supports and consult with the teachers and help with the teachers on this as well. So those are our positions that are in our budget and some of the high level reasons as to why. We tried to also, when we're talking about the budget scenarios, I think we shared this at the meeting that we all were together earlier last month. We're putting forward the needs-based budget. Some people ask, why not the strategic budget? And it would be great if we could, have what we've been pushing down the way, years and years of, requests in some of these areas. But we understand too that with our fixed cost increases, that, some of these strategic investments will need to, wait for other years, and when we're able to do that, but because we don't want to have the tax burden be too high for.
But aren't you doing some of the strategic stuff inside of the needs-based budget as well? Like are you really truly going like average flat across the district? No. Probably not, right?
No.
So you have investment areas.
Yeah, we do. So that's a good question. A great example of that is in our budget. And, even if it was a worst case scenario and things didn't pass, it's still in our budget, is that ELA, that literacy program that will, to have a high quality literacy program, K-8 will be so transformative. And we've been piloting in multiple classes this past year. It's been a 1.5 year process to get to choosing that and trying it and getting all of our teachers trained. So that is an investment, Yeah, absolutely. So it's just that sometimes we may get asked, well, why not this? Why not? And I'll talk about that kind of right at the end, but there's a reason, because we're being, responsible. And we know that some things take time, but it's taken 15 years for us to build a lot of these things into our district. And that's why we're in a good spot, and we want to continue to improve, and priorities do change over years too. So coming back to the gap, our goal is to, be able to have the funding in order to bridge the gap into the future, into many years into the future. So as I talk about it, it's really a simple, critical juncture for folks. It's to continue on the nice path of investing in our strategic needs and continued improvement for our students, or it will be a reduction in services and programs people learning and unraveling our decades of progress. It is pretty bad.
Clouds on the horizon.
A reminder that the last time, when the previous superintendent, Dr. Marushek, was here, and for the 415 operational override, and he said, a lot of communities like us might need to have an infusion of funds about every 5 years, kind of similar to what I said, in Grafton and some other places. We were able to, because of COVID and lots of different reasons and tight management and making reductions, we've been trying to go as long as we can, have made it 11 years. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done to be able to do that. But last year I had the snowplow effect, where we've had to push a lot of things that people in the community ask for, or requests that we get every year that get cut out every year from the budget, because we can't quite do that. Could be from classroom libraries to late buses. We're looking at full day pre-K at some point. Hopefully, we haven't been able to bring back the media center library specialist at the middle school that was cut a number of years ago, but we brought some of our programs back over the years, but not everything. And so that is what's kind of to the right of what different requests have come into us. And then this is the scary slide, but it is a reality that it is not easy to come up with $4.1 million of potential reductions in what we're calling the contingency reduction budget. If we were not to be able to get the funds from the towns, like worst case scenario, we still need to meet notifications and let staff know. We are at more than 60 positions across. We have about 400 staff in our district. It includes teachers, administration, paraprofessionals, ABAs, custodians, admin assistants, nursing. I'm reading it just so you'll see nursing, counseling, co-op, interns. And I'm sure I'm missing some categories in there. Everyone is and everywhere is impacted. It will increase average class sizes to over 25 to 34 range, depending on the grade levels. It 100% is going to reduce elective offerings. Some electives that we have that you can imagine at, especially at the secondary level, you know, you have music, technology, health, PE, world language, art. Am I missing anything? That's yeah. And almost all of those are going to be impacted. We are taking an approach of trying not to have full programs be eliminated. It's more of a reduction across everything as opposed to eliminating something entirely as best as we're able to. At the high school level, we have a lot of, we just got recognized this year for our advanced placement. An honor roll, it's the highest scores that we've ever had, highest number of students taking AP classes, advanced placement stat classes. And when we have to reduce to only the core classes and reduce staff at, let's say, ELA, math, science, social studies, the core areas, then we will not be able to provide all of those advanced placement classes that we have. You're probably all aware we have a Spanish immersion program. Some of those might have to be combined or not filled for some openings. We will be looking at fees. Fees aren't going to get our way, you know, they're not going to fix this, but we are looking at lots of different ways to increase revenue as well to support the budget, but the fees will have to increase as well. And some portions of athletics will be impacted, particularly at the younger grades. And this is
just gonna throw out
this
there
is the
for-
point when I want to stop talking about all this because it's so
For the
bad.
people listening, though, this doesn't affect any of your previous capital projects, right? Like
No.
athletics or roof or
Yeah. no,
maintenance.
Capital projects are,
Completely
is-
different.
Making sure everybody's clear. on
and you can't legally use any of that money for any of this. It's two separate things.
Those questions are gonna come up.
Yeah.
And so-
Yeah, and hold that. I want to actually get to that because I wanted to just point out like a resource on that, but I'm glad that you brought that up. On some of the impact too, a lot of our clubs and activities, we have teachers and staff that receive stipends for that. And those stipends will have to be eliminated. So a lot of our clubs won't be able to be funded through the school. So further impact would be, we're considered a model like NIAS school for accreditation. We would be risk accreditation at the high school. It doesn't happen immediately, but we would not be considered model with all of these cuts. It would impact our student achievement and literacy rates because we're going to need to cut back and have higher class sizes. It would likely increase out of district referrals, at least referrals, due to some of the core services when we talk about like what the impact we've had with our chronic absenteeism. Some of those programs that are in place to keep kids in school would not be in place anymore. We already have staff looking for jobs, knowing that they might be in a position of getting a pink slip potentially and might not want to wait to see if it goes through or not. And I'd already talked about school choice, the impact of that from a revenue standpoint, and the declining enrollment I spoke to as well. And there just would be a lot of unmet needs across the grade. It's a really dire situation. And I don't say that lightly because I try not to lead at all with like fear or some big headline, but 4.1 in a small district like ours is really, it will send us back more than 15 years of the work. But what I like to say, as I go to the next slide, is that, but it's a choice and we don't have to go in that way. And I really, the towns of Mendon and Upton have always been so supportive of the school district. And we're really thankful for the partnerships that we have with all of you and the various boards and the ongoing conversations with community members, which we'll continue to do. So it's just a matter of what the communities will end up wanting to choose. And so that's our last slide. To your point, you asked about, what was it? It was the
Capital.
difference. Yeah. So right now, I created, and it's on our website, like these budget bites. I don't know, where it just has some of these messages. And
Yeah.
one is going to be just to try to explain the difference between those, because I know that's a question that comes up. And then we also will have frequently asked questions that are available on our website as they come through. And that's the first one we get asked, is explaining the difference between that, and that will be.
It's hard because most households don't budget that way. And
Right, yeah.
sometimes it's hard to understand the
Yeah.
cost layout there.
Yeah, no, so it's a great, I'm glad you brought it up, because we, at one point, we're gonna put it in our presentation, we just haven't added it to our presentation yet.
But
We have plenty of slides already.
the analogy Maureen has used before is, you have a mortgage, that's your capital investment, then you've got your electric bill and your phone bill and all the food bills and all the stuff they actually live every day. That's the operational side.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good analogy, but that's why she's the superintendent. Questions?
Good answer. And thank you for your time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm looking ahead to my neighbors asking me what the heck's going on with the amount of money that's being asked. My first statement, and you can tell me if this is a good summary, is that our health insurance premiums are going up. And that's for two reasons. One, we self-fund ourselves, and we have had historical high claims. And we can't solve that problem. We've actually gone and talked to two of the health providers, and they've gone, ha, 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 no, we're not taking you on. Is that a fair statement?
Let's clarify one thing. So the fact that we're self-funded actually saves us money.
Right.
Because when you're in a fully insured plan, the insurance company is going to want about a 12 to 15% profit margin, which we don't have to deal with. Plus, the insurance company also gets the rebates from pharmaceuticals. You'll notice how certain drugs are pushed by doctors and health insurance. We'll cover that one. It's because they get paid to do that. We now will get that money instead of the insurance company. So that does save us. So I would make sure that you clarify that self-funding. But yes, we have a half a dozen or more excessively high claims. The plan we have to pay up to $175,000. Beyond that, we have stop loss coverage. We have multiple claims that have exceeded that stop loss coverage. And that's just unique. I did talk to Dr. Steele about their health insurance as well. And his response was, well, we don't have very many high claims right now. We're in a really good place. And we've been in that place too.
Yeah.
We're not there now.
And to repeat something you said at the joint meeting, no, we can't fire those 6 people.
No, that's not an option. Health insurance is supposed to be there when you need it. The problem is that health insurance is different than where, like, Mike was in the insurance business for a long time. They have so many people paying premiums that never make a claim. So they've got money in a pool that's invested so they can afford those claims. Health insurance, no matter what, you're paying the claims. Even if it's fully insured, the next year they hit you with bigger premiums. No matter what, you pay the claims.
The health insurance rise was also due to an increased number of people getting on.
This year. So that's why the budgetary number looks so large. Usually we plan for 4 or 5 additional people. This year we had 16 additional people as of like a month ago. So it's even gone up that signed on, and that's a massive increase. So we're going to have a shortfall in our accounts this year. And that's part of why we're budgeting for next year, because we're not going to offset it with next year. We got to pay the claims this year, but that's why it looks so large. That's why it says 32% instead of 23.
Okay, my second, go take a turn.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, my second observation is special ed is driving up costs. And I wanted to look at one of the slides. You're projecting that there are going to be 22 special ed students going out of district. How much per student are we going to end up paying for those? What's the per cost for those compared to the cost that we spend for students who aren't special ed going out?
So out of district tuitions can range anywhere from the lowest is around 50 or 60,000 to a high of 700,000 or 800,000 just for the tuition.
So
Then you
there
have
isn't
transportation.
a general education corollary. So when you said special education students going out of district versus not special education students going out of district. When we
Apples
talk
and
about schools,
oranges.
yes, there aren't general education students going out of district to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Spoken to somebody at work.
The comparison should be the special education out of district tuition for a specific program. What's that compared to paying staff to offer that sort of program in-house?
Well, I was going to say, that's the question I think Mike answered at the multi-board meeting. And in some cases, that's part of the reason that we have school psychologists or other positions that help provide services in-house, but most of the kids that are placed out with, there's no way we could provide these services. They're severe needs.
Right, and it's the
Much
same
higher.
for advanced serve. No, we can't stop teaching these students the same way we can't fire people who submit claims. They live in our two towns.
Right,
Federal, state law says we provide services.
right.
Okay.
And as much as we try to predict, sometimes families might move in, some move out. It is pretty fluid. We track it over the course of the year. And then when we get to this point for budget season and planning, if we have students that might be in an evaluation, it doesn't, they might be out for an evaluation, doesn't mean that they will be placed in and out of district placement. They might be come back, and some do go, in and out, but we try to plan as much as we can and be as conservative as we can in that planning.
And you also have to budget a little bit in those accounts because there's this thing in the state called the move-in law that applies only to private out-of-district placements. But if they go to a public school, which could be a collaborative school, if somebody were to move into Mendon or Upton tomorrow, we own the tuition tomorrow. Now, we didn't plan for that a year ago when we did our budget, so that you have to have a little bit of extra money budgeted for those potential changes that happen.
I think when I look at this, so it's insurance is one category it's over here.
Yeah.
When I think I don't like to call out any line item from a service that's being offered within your budget could have an astronomical, unpredictable increase, whether it's special education, whether it's transportation, what have you. So I hope we're not focusing on which line item it is. It's that you've got two items that I see right off the bat that you've never seen these types of increases historically.
Right.
And you hit it this year. So it's the timing it's the timing and the amount.
Right.
Not so much which line item is being impacted, except for insurance. I'm fully happy blaming insurance for a lot of this.
I would agree.
The service is offered. I don't think it could happen potentially in any line item. So I hate to
Right.
focus on which ones. If that makes sense.
Our goal is to provide appropriate services for every student that comes to our district and lives in our community.
And the more we can provide strong services within our district, that's good for kids. It's good for all students. But so we have invested in, some staff, like a social worker in the past, and some adjustment counselors to build out students that might be in a hospital setting and then coming in and keeping them and working with attendance and other things or therapeutic setting here as much as we're able to. But sometimes there are students who need additional services that we wouldn't be able to, provide here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I had, so you alluded to that past failed override from before 2015. I don't remember when that was.
I'm not sure there was an override. It was
Okay.
just we had.
There were cuts. Okay. So I think
2010. it was-
2010, so there were reductions. I know it was before my oldest started kindergarten, but I heard stories about it. And so I wonder, is there information? I know you mentioned that it took years to dig back out of that, right? There were long-term costs of those short-term reductions. So I'm wondering, is there information on the website about,
Tell the story.
it's a story that I think people want to assume we're going to save money by doing this. If we don't, we don't, but there's always more of a cost. And so I just wonder if we
No cost.
can, if we can share that story in detail, where, what did it mean? Because I know from talking to other parents who had older students in the district who they talked about the class.
So the class.
There were some classes that had combined grades for Spanish immersion, and it was anyhow. So I don't want that for our district,
And
but I
some
think
programs
some
have,
people don't.
World language, there's no
Right.
world language. I'm trying to think when I came in right after.
Well,
We
Right.
started to build back, so I can think of the things that we didn't have any of those items. And even when I was hired as the director of curriculum, that had been cut. So you didn't have anyone overseeing any teaching and learning and curriculum, in the district. And able
And
to-
thanks.
School choice thing, wasn't that reversed?
What's
at
that?
time? School choice, didn't you?
We never reversed to where we were paying out more than we took in, but it came where it was much closer.
Yeah.
I think if you show, to the growth that Mike called out in terms of the lowest and the
Yeah.
highest today, show what it was in 9.
Right.
And
Yeah, we'd have to, I'm not sure if the state still has that data on there. I'd have to look for it, but I mean, a
or
good,
a spreadsheet on the server somewhere, Jay.
yeah, probably somewhere. You know, a good example is high school athletics became 100% self-funded program to the point that we had difficulty fielding a girls basketball team because the fees were so high that parents were like, I can't, I'm not going to pay that. They were, I think, $700 or $800 to play basketball. That was the kind of things we had to go to. And we worked our way slowly out of that. I think those fees came down probably around the time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But they're still the highest in the region too, you know, right now, yeah, in Blackstone.
athletic fees or
Yeah.
no athletic fees.
Or one of the highest, you know, when you do comparisons.
Good thing we're gonna have better facilities soon.
Yeah.
You can go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So I had a question about kind of looking forward. So obviously you're presenting a needs-based budget that has some things that would improve services, but there were other things that you're not including in this budget, just because they don't fit within. So is this override proposal or this budget proposal setting you up to be able to incrementally add those in the future? Or are we always going to be facing a structural issue and never quite being able to add the improvements that you're looking to add?
That's a great question. What?
I went back to this slide because
That's the one I was.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'll kind of answer it in two different ways. I mean, I believe schools in general tend to be in the structural deficit of some sort for just the way costs are rising right now and the, you know, the caps with 2.5 and we're not getting any state funding. And we have been able to manage with some grants. And so we use grants really strategically to get to our strategic investments. So we will continue to prioritize those investments and then bring some in when we can, as we have. But the priorities, you know, we have to adjust them kind of over the years and we look for opportunities to do that. So when we've had declining enrollment in one area, then maybe that's a position that we might not keep, right? Because of declining enrollment, but then now that's a position in the budget that now we can use for strategic investment, which is what we did to get, I believe at the time of like the instructional coach and assistant principal. I think there was some movement in different ways to kind of meet those needs that we had at that time. But the goal is to keep improving but be really focused on our strategic priorities. And some are costs have different costs, right?
But I think you also need to, right, because we've been talking about having a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Right? You could build out a long-term 5-year plan to help us be able to say, hey, is there an approach that we need to take? Whatever happens when we get through this budget season, there's going to need to be some sort of planning moving forward. If something doesn't go through, there's definitively going to need to be some sort of plan. If it does go through, there should still be a plan of what does the next 5 years look like so that we can be better prepared, just like we're trying to do on capital spending and all that other stuff to try and get you to where you need to go.
And I would say a good example of what's being talked about here would be something like, reduction in athletic fees. If you were going to use revenue from the new field system to offset athletic fees and not to offset costs, that's important to know, right? That benefits the students, right? Doesn't benefit our budget, but it's important.
Exactly.
Right, so.
And we're in year 3 of our strategic plan. We do get a lot of input when we're developing our plans. We've been careful in our plan, at least since I've been here, to not have it be heavy on investments, so much because we don't always know what we'll have for money. But I think in our next plan, we could probably be able to target some that have those investments. A couple of plans ago, when they were still building back from like that kind of devastating cuts in 2009 and 10, that time period, you had specific like this kind of position, this kind of position. We've been more focusing on kind of general programming and services rather than saying a position. But our goal, we're always working in a 5-year plan, but we could probably do a better job of tying it in so you're able to see like from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, you're working on a 5-year plan in terms of strategy that doesn't come with a cost associated. Right, so this is a 5-year plan-ish, right? Right, is this a $100 million budget in order to support all these things, right? You know, just examples by extreme.
Two.
Or is it another $2 million?
Right.
Right, I don't know.
So we kind of can project out revenue. The revenue side is pretty easy to, not easy, but you can project that out. The expenditure side, some of that is driven by enrollment, some of that's going to be driven by positions, people retiring. I mean,
Yeah, well, so,
it
all right,
can
so
be
adding a
done,
late
but
bus.
it's a little more complicated, like a late bus.
I don't know what a late bus costs. I don't know what full day pre-K costs. I don't know what is the musical instrument purchase cost. Like, those are just the things, like, I don't know the dollars.
Well, I can tell you as a new instruments, every band director in every school wants tubas, and they're $10,000 a piece.
So they're asked every year and
So-
get cut every year.
That's why my son plays trumpet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a list of some targeted line items, not really a strategic plan. It's just to give a sense of
Yeah,
what people ask for, either internally or externally for some things that we haven't been able to meet, but.
So, you know, Dr. Steele spoke about it as well. We had requests. We tell everybody, tell us what you need. That was about 1.5 million more than we finally are at now. So we reduced some of those things out just because they're not realistic at this point in time. And it's still a substantial increase.
Yeah.
Can you ever fund everything you'd ever want and need? Probably not.
Yeah.
That should be a given.
I have two questions. The first one, where we have the two towns, if one town passes the override and doesn't pass it, then do we fund at the level of the town that didn't pass it?
You fund that whatever, yes, if it doesn't pass at all 4 votes, both town meetings, both ballot votes, the override has failed. The school committee then can reconsider the budget, resubmit it either at the same amount or reduced amount, but not a higher amount. Then the towns have 45 days to act on that new request. So if you remember for FY16, Upton passed everything, Mendon passed at the town meeting, not at the ballot vote. The school committee chose to go forward with the same budget. Mendon voted a second time and it passed the second time. That was like June 30th. So it was,
But there was a year when one passed and one didn't, and everything was funded.
yes, it goes back to whatever is
The
within
town,
the
the
levy.
town that did pass, they still increased it and kept that extra revenue. But the point is that if one passes and one doesn't, it doesn't force the one that didn't pass to come up with the funds.
No, it goes down to the reduced level.
Right.
Absolutely.
The second question is and I know, Maureen, you and I spoke about this at that meeting. Is there a plan to come up with a detailed breakdown of exactly what will or won't be offered if it does fail? So everybody understands the stakes of whatever we decide upon. If it doesn't pass, so when we put this forward, exactly what's going to happen.
Yes. We're not gonna do that list until we notify our staff.
Okay,
And we told staff that by the end of April, that we would be getting those notifications. Our contractual deadline is May 15th, but our goal is to notify. And so I'm speaking kind of in general terms to kind of
Yes.
give you a sense, but it is, when I say it's 60+ positions, I didn't count it. We worked all day on it today. You know, it's more, it's not 60, it's closer to 70 probably. And-
but
Yeah.
I think I remember the conversation we had. The problem is we have a lot of good teachers and there are a lot of towns
Mhm.
and cities that would love to get those teachers to come work in their communities.
Yeah.
And if you do, you can see this is rhetorical. I mean, I understand. I just want to make sure everybody who watches understands what part of the problem of being specific is the people who are specifically impacted within the system. They're gonna have to look elsewhere because they can't.
They have to do what's best
they
for
have to do what's
themselves.
best for
Yeah.
themselves.
Correct.
And, you know, so walking this fine line to have everyone feel okay and like everything's great. And we are working so hard to make sure it continues to be great and hope that we don't lose in this 1 month of uncertainty until it goes through the process, that we won't lose. If we're giving notices to 60+ staff, that we don't lose all of our great people that we have. And So I try to tell them and all the work that we're doing and that our towns are really supportive and, we care about them. But yeah, it's a really significant, 4 million is not,
A big
it's,
chunk.
yeah, it's not like others. I'm not saying, 8 positions isn't a lot either. Every position is a person and.
It's a lot more than 60.
Right. So we have emphasized that as much as we can't like generate more revenue by, selling more widgets, neither can the towns. We're all limited by what you can do. So it's not like the towns aren't supporting us. They don't have any more options than we have.
Are we able to break the proposal down like we did on the previous vote to what is the per, like what's it on my tax
Yes,
bill?
once we know what the override amount is going
Yeah.
to the towns, and it's an Excel sheet that I have, we'll put it on the website. You
Yeah.
can put in your property value and it'll tell you what your tax is.
We'll do the same thing we did with the tax
And is
code, once
that-
we know what the numbers are.
And refresh me on process. Is that an annual
Yeah.
cost to your tax bill or
Annual.
Just a
cost to your tax
one-time?
bill. Well, it's annual every year though. It's a permanent or.
it's an annual increase to your assessed value?
No, not your assessed value, your tax.
So I have other questions about mechanics around the proposed override. That's not really part of the budget. I do think that we probably should get to the budget conversation and we can continue that conversation around the mechanics and stuff like that.
I just have a clarification for something I thought I heard, and it might was your scenario when you said if one town passes and one town doesn't. What I thought I heard was that it would go to the lower amount, but I don't think that's if the school committee recertifies to the lower amount.
Well, so the process is, let's say it goes to both towns, one town or the other town rejects it. The
Right.
school committee recertifies it, let's say it's at a reduced amount.
Right.
Goes back to the towns, they reject it again. The school committee's last option is,
Hold that thought. They recertify to a low amount. In that scenario, if they both pass it,
then that's the amount your
Right.
budget is, if they
Right.
both pass.
and if the first town, say in this case, I think Upton passed one, Mendon didn't.
They
Upton
don't have to act.
Right, but they keep, to what I heard was they kept the difference. They had a surplus.
So yeah, actually, we had this conversation today. So there's 2 steps. The town meeting vote appropriates the money. The ballot vote allows you to exceed 2.5 and collect the taxes. So you then have the authority to collect those taxes and you have to use it for the
Space in
school.
their levy.
Right.
Yes. That's right.
Or you do an underwrite and make it go away, which is what.
Right, I just want to be really clear, but that first vote, when one passes, one doesn't automatically go to the lower amount. It goes back to the school committee and they
Correct.
have a choice to either send it back to the same amount or a lower amount.
Right,
And we would do the process again.
correct. And you have
If they
45
vote-
days to do it.
And if one passes and one doesn't, it goes back to the school committee again, I think, and you have the opportunity to call a
Joint town meeting, right, which is the.
And then that's the final straw where whatever that joint town meeting decides, both towns abide by it.
Right, well, then the towns have to figure out how to pay for it.
But the idea that you go to a lower amount, that's because the school committee came back and asked for less.
Or I think what Mike was getting at is, let's say it fails, everything fails all the way across, whatever was the town that had the lowest assessment, then the other town is going to have to match that assessment as far as the enrollment percentage. So
When
it
you say
brings the whole
both fails
budget
all the
down.
way across, what are you referring to?
Say what?
When you say it fails both.
Everything fails, both votes and the joint town meeting. The whole thing goes down in
But
flames.
it's gotta go through. I mean,
Yes, it is.
You have the option to bring it forward to a joint town.
Right.
3-step
And
process.
the key to that is, as of July 1, if we don't have an approved budget, we then operate on what's called a 112 budget that's set by the state. What that will be set at is the current year's budget. It'll be 0
I
year.
guess my point, I don't want people to walk out of this saying on this first, on the first ballot, and I don't think this is what you're saying, but the first ballot, if one town passes, one town does,
It just
it
goes-
goes out, and that's
Right.
it. Because people would say, oh, I would vote for it.
Right.
It's not that simple.
No, it can be a fairly long process that we would like to have not be so long.
Since we're getting into the mechanics, I guess we also have the option to.
I'm gonna stop sharing if that's.
We could have the option to say that as a town, we decide to fund the full assessment and go to an override to fund the rest of the operational budget of the town. Example by extremes.
All right, so I'm gonna put all of the mechanics on hold, just like you suggested for
Yes.
1 second here. Carl, do you have a non-mechanical
Yes, I have a
question? All right, go ahead.
In terms of 5-year plans and whatnot, My recommendation is that by the time we're at town meeting, you're going to present, here's our 2.5 override proposal. At that time, say how many years it's going to be until the next time you think there's going to be a 2.5 budget. Are you going, if you're going to say in 2 years, that might be a stretch. If you say we're going to plan for 5 years, that might go over better. But I'm just
The school
saying,
doesn't own the decision to go to an override.
okay,
The school provides a budget. If the
Right.
budget is outside of what we can pay for, and we need to go to 2.5 override in order
Turn
to
it
pay
into a
for it,
mechanical.
right? It is a mechanical question.
Alright, so I want to just wrap up this presentation with just one sort of statement that it really and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but it really seems like the schools are moving to maybe even more services than academics at this point. Like it's like there are a lot of needs for the students, and you're providing healthcare, and you're providing, non-academic experiences that they need to sort of survive in the current world. And that academics is sort of the baseline, and it's like all of this other stuff seems to be really the reality of what school is nowadays, which is not sort of the traditional mathematics, English, style curriculums. And that is much more amorphous and new, I think, to a lot of the voter base. And that seems to be a lot of the confusion I hear out in the community is this, why do we, you've explained it, I'm just sort of restating it here, but like, why do we need these psychologists, and why do we need English as a second language, and these are services that are not just like required, but needed.
Well, they're mandated by the state.
Right, but
So-
on the edges, we're not really providing everything we want, right? So you want to sort of step that up. And the things that we're stepping up aren't like additional mathematics books. The things that we're stepping up are additional services to the students. And I think that's a key component here, because it's not really something you can put a fine point on, especially if a student comes into the system. I mean, you talked about something that is kind of, that's not talked about a lot, but like if a student comes out of a hospital setting and into an academic setting and they need supports, and those aren't supports that are so extreme that they have to be sent out, but they might not be something that you're capable of 100% providing, then that student sort of falls through the cracks, right? And then makes it out of the system as another number. And hopefully we've helped best we can. What you guys seem to be talking about is the need to really boost that up and actually hit every student in these sort of social support services scenarios, because it seems like every student needs that now. And it seems like we talk a lot more about the machinations and the services than we ever really do about the academics. So
I'll give you a short answer, and I'm going to let Maureen talk because she can do it better. But the short answer is, when I was in 6th grade, which would have probably been 1966 or 67, school in 6th grade today is not what it was in 1966 or 67. It's a whole different world.
and I just don't think that's really apparent unless you're in the system or you have kids and you're really immersed in the classroom.
I'll make you feel that it wasn't in the 80s either.
Right, yeah. I'll give a couple comments. Probably in my that's actually an interesting point. I love when I get questions because it makes me think differently. I didn't talk a lot about academics, right? I mean, I could have, but I didn't. I talked about some of the positions that we're looking for to meet those mandated services, because that's kind of the focus this year. I could have talked about the investments that we make to support academics, which I have in the past, like our iReady assessment system that tracks the data of our students, and then we're able to give interventions for those students in academics after the high quality instructional materials. I could do a whole presentation of all of the years that we've been in a curriculum cycle and investing in that in order to have that strong program. I could talk about advanced placement and our investment in Mass Insight, which we wouldn't be able to be in, which supports all of our teachers to be the top quality AP teachers in order for our students to excel. I mean, there are thousands of these, our internship program, then what we're doing with that and how we've grown that. So that is much of our focus, but we do have some mandated needs that we cut those two positions in the last few years, like for special education, that we have to bring back because of numbers. You know, and the school psychologist, it's about meeting compliance. We just went through a whole state compliance review and had a number of indicators, and some indicators were with timelines, not meeting timelines by, you know, state and federal law. And part of that is just not having enough staff in order to meet the timelines in order to do that. And just, but yeah, not everyone understands what it's like to be in school today, particularly post-COVID. There's a lot of recovery and interventions that we've been putting.
But you don't see one as being more important than the other. They seem to need to coexist, right?
Well, our mission is to empower all learners to thrive. And when we talk about that and live it, it's about academically, social, emotionally, behaviorally, where they can and have experiences in deeper learning and high quality instruction and you know, equity and all the services that we provide. So then when they leave our system, they can thrive in the world. That's our goal. But it's not just academics that help you thrive in the world. I think we all know that, right? So
And there's a huge cost
Yeah.
to the society as a whole in the community.
yeah,
They don't get that.
Yeah.
When they're in school.
and a lot of the interventions we want to put in place are at the younger grade level because we know that's where. Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for a lot.
So I just wanted to have a little bit of social commentary there as we balance out the money. Because it's important. It's a major part of our community without the money.
It was interesting, something that the Superintendent of Valley Tech talked about with some of their materials they use to teach, you know, are licensed on computers. And it's so many years and, you know, you have to renew it and pay for it again.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, I was in the 70s and I had some school books from the 50s. Here,
Still use some of those.
Still
grammar
may.
books.
because that,
I did.
Same like you use for eighth grade.
My grammar book
but
from
the
19.
point is, but now, if they are online, they expire. And
Correct.
you lose a license. You can't say, all right, we're not gonna replace the textbooks this year. Well, if they're online, you have a choice, otherwise there's nothing to use.
You guys want to stick around for another hour?
Not really, but sure.
All right. Well, I thank you for doing your
Yeah,
17th
yeah.
presentation.
We used to stay, we can stay.
No, I'm joking. We have a lot of time. I mean, we're gonna talk about our budget, if you're interested. And then we will have a long discussion about your budget, I am sure. So all that will be very interesting, but you don't need to stick around. We know that this is difficult. We've been through a couple of these presentations. We know that every time we go to one of these boards, it's another type of set of conversations. We know that you're all very unsure. We're gonna do our best to also give you some stability. So we're gonna talk through that and hopefully give you the answer that you want. Probably not, but I just want to give you some hope. But it'll be what you need, or at least the best we can do. So I think we're all doing that. And I really hope this works out on all towns and our students' behalf. I think it's important. There's a lot going on this year. It's very hard. But we appreciate you coming out to talk to us. So thank you.
So we're dismissed? Class
You're dismissed. Class dismissed.
Jeremy,
Jeremy.
I'll answer you on that about the street
We're
tomorrow.
plugged in.
I'll figure it out.
Thank you.
So
Not
who's
been
gonna
good.
climb in there? Because that's not something I'm capable of.
Oh, you just
I got
pulled it
you.
out.
You got me?
I got you.
I mean, I can crawl under there, but then I'm here for the night, so probably a couple of weeks. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Jay, thank you, Maureen.
Ready?
Yeah.
Should I play the theme music?
Out of the easy part. All right, so mechanics. So I wanted to start off talking about the statewide financial environment. So Mass Municipal Associations sent out a report in October called The Perfect Storm, which talked about the historic pressures that cities and towns are facing. Followed up with their Navigating the Storm report a few months later, essentially saying the state hasn't kept up with what's called UGA, unrestricted general government aid, as a proportion of state revenues, or as a proportion of the state government, in proportion with how the state government budget has grown, and locals are worse off for it, and we don't have the local revenue raising tools necessary to make up that gap. Prop 2.5 doesn't keep up. So there's some stuff in the Municipal Empowerment Act which would give locals some increased revenue raising tools, but none of that is law right now. The chart on the right shows override requests in dollar values, which is the bar in the left hand side of the graph, and then the count, which is the line in the right hand side of the graph. So you see the drastic jump, of course, in dollar values, but in count in the last 3 years. Across the Commonwealth. So we're not alone in being in a situation in which the structural nature of our revenue picture doesn't meet the structural nature of our expenses. This is just some snippets here. Marshfield 7.5, these are all override considerations. And I get that a lot of these communities are different sizes than us, but it's painful in each of those communities. So Marshfield, 7.5 million, Eastham, 3 million, Abington, crushing service cuts or a multi-million-dollar override, Grafton, 5 million. I know kind of anecdotally, Upton's at about looking at 2.5 million, give or take, and Bellingham's in the $4 to $5 million range for an override. Brookline, where I used to work, does it in 3-year clips, so they have to go back and ask voters all the time. They are looking for over $23 million, almost $18 million of it for the schools. And it is to maintain existing services, not to add new programs.
So like almost our whole budget.
Just to maintain. Again, they're 60,000 people, but still. Hadley, 11 million. Marblehead was debating shutting down the library entirely, or go ahead with a tiered override vote. So these are different types of communities. A lot of these are affluent communities. These are well-run professional communities, good school districts, whole deal. It's not a matter of mismanagement or excess. It is a structural issue that we're facing. So how do we play into that? So these 3 are taken from the select board goals for fiscal 27. So multi-year planning and forecasting, which was the crux of executing number 2, which was making Mendon competitive in our labor market. So our compensation and classification study. So both of those things hand in hand, which I presented to the select board as part of our negotiation strategy. And then operational efficiency and redundancy. So do we have the right people doing the right things? Can we pick that up when somebody moves on to something else? Do we have the right external partners in place, whether it's regionalization through IMA sorts of things, or if it's vendor relationships. So this is, I want to talk a little bit about where we are here. So our revenues are essentially up 2%. So we right-sized local receipts in fiscal 26. So that means our jump up in fiscal 27 is not huge. Our state aid's up, I think like 0.2% or something. And then our levy, I'll talk about new growth in a little bit, but that's new growth and 2.5% increase. Got about $700,000 in free cash left unspent right now, and just over $2 million in stabilization. In this summary here, so when we talk about level service expenses, I've struggled with how to present this. So the school budget request in its entirety is presented as a level service expense. So there's a roughly $2.4 million increase from the schools from fiscal 26 to fiscal 27. We had talked about earlier an affordability cap at about $600,000. So what we could do inside of Prop 2.5 would be about $600,000 from the get-go. So those additional municipal investments are stuff on the municipal side that we've talked about before: firefighter, assistant town administrator, change in the executive assistant for the fire department, and then some smaller pieces that I'll go through later. But I just want to say, I'll go through how we're presenting a level service versus additional investment here. There's not really a super clean way to do it, but I'll go into a little bit more. So just those level service is a 12% increase That doesn't include those strategic investment areas. So what MURSD talked about before, what BBT talked about before, those additional positions not in there. That 446,000 in additional municipal investments not in the 1.4 million. And then we don't currently have debt inside of the levy, which is a goal of mine and a goal of the select boards over the next handful of years. So looking at deficit drivers, so in the level service realm, we adjusted wages for folks to attract and maintain talent, and that has a cost to it. And then the larger drivers on the MURSD side, which we've talked at length about over the last hour or so, health insurance, special education, out of district tuitions, and then their contracts. When we look at the enhanced service drivers, I actually want to start at the bottom and move up. So that 400,000 in the bottom is baked into the 1.4 million level service that we looked at before. I presented, thought about, have, in my spreadsheet, the school district's certified budget as a level service, in that the select board doesn't have a lever to pull on the expense side of that. What the school committee certifies is what gets put into our budget to fund. We have levers to pull on the revenue side, but not on the expenditure side. So because there's nothing you can do about it, I have it on the level side. But it's a big number on their needs-based FTEs, which I think the rationale has been laid out a couple of times here. And then 2 firefighter full-time equivalents, assistant town administrator. These are all net numbers too, including fully loaded costs. So this is health insurance, and then the police admin assistant and the assistant town administrator have pay-fors, partial pay-fors, where there are reductions in other parts of the budget. So the assistant town administrator has it's 70 odd and 20 odd for salary and benefits, but we're seeing reductions in other parts of the budget to get there. So you can see there's not, in terms of enhanced service, we're talking about a $25 million budget, and we have $400,000 that we're looking to do increased investment into. The driver of our $1.4 million gap right now is a level service approach, not an enhanced service approach. So if we've got 1.4 million between 1.4 and 1.8. So if we fully fund our level service, including the certified school district budget, we're at roughly $1.4 million to come up with. All the additive investments on the town side were about $400,000, so about 1.8. There are some, call it the searching the couch cushions method, which I'm doing right now before I send out a finalized packet to both finance committee and select board, either by the end of the day tomorrow or midday Friday. So it's not going to be that exactly. Well, I'm going to shave down on the corners and places where I can. So I'm going to talk in round numbers.
Just the 446 I see there, that is your full list of possibilities. So you haven't even decided going forward with that full amount.
Correct. So my anticipation is that any sort of funding outside of the current levy will be somewhere between 1.4 and 1.8 million dollars. And so we've got a couple of ways to approach that. We can cut $1.4 million worth of stuff. And like the superintendent had talked about, the $4 million cuts on the school side, that would be equally detrimental to town services on our side. And then when we see, we've got the same cost pressures as the school does, so that solves our problem year 1, makes it a solvable problem in year 2, and then we're going to see the same problems in year 3, 4, 5, roughly speaking. So we're looking at headcount reduction, service reduction. We possibly have to reopen collective bargaining agreements, affordability sense, and we're kicking the can on it. We could fund the level service budget, $1.4 million override request. These are rough numbers. You see $600 on a $650,000 home. We will absolutely fine tune what that is. We're talking in orders of magnitude here. So $1.4 million override request would be approximately $600 per year as a tax increase on a $650,000 home, which is right around the average or median home value in Mendon. So that's a really big number forever. And then, or it's a big number forever. A really big number is if we fund everything at $1.8 million, we're looking at more like a $900 per year for the average homeowner. And that allows us to do future investments. It gives us more bandwidth to do future investments, of course, more revenue for the town. But in my opinion, it is probably not a palatable dollar increase for the average homeowner, especially on the heels of a debt exclusion in a prior year. And looking at, we'll do debt exclusion management and try to keep debt service payments kind of level year over year. But the town also has debt exclusions that we're going to be asking voters for at some point in the future. So $900 is high. So what I've been working on, and this is my socialization of this concept, is this hybrid approach. So where we look at an override request in the $1 million range and use existing resources in the $850,000 range. So again, those are round numbers. I want this discussion to be on the approach, and then we'll schedule a meeting on Tuesday, like that we need for any sort of ballot question language, and talk about this exact specific number. But it is using existing resources in the current year, and then ramping down those resources and using new growth to fill the subsequent gap. And then in even further out years, using that new growth to pay back stabilization. That brings the average taxpayer impact down below $500 a year. I forgot the second bullet point here. So one of the other levers, we've asked the school district to go back and recertify a budget using a greater percentage of their reserves, or reduce expenditures in some capacity. So reduce the request to both communities by $200,000. The rationale being the town is moving below its target of 8% of
200,000 a piece, or
in aggregate. So rough, little bit less than 100,000 for us, but if we're talking 55 to 45, so 200,000 in aggregate. So that reduces our reserves below our 8% level to minimize taxpayer impact. So what we're asking the school district to do is also reduce their reserves below their level to reduce taxpayer impact. So it ties our hands in the future. So there's a lot of numbers in here. So let me just focus on fiscal 27 so I can explain the different rows. Don't worry about all the different columns right now. So in fiscal 27, proposition 2.5 annual growth. That means we take our total inside the levy, tax levy from the year before, apply 2.5% to it, and that's our growth there. We have no override, no operational override going on right now. Then that's our anticipated new growth, $175,000. I'll pause for a moment. If you recall, our certified new growth in fiscal 26 was more like $400,000, but that was the 23 Cape Road warehouse coming online. I've slide on it a little bit, but that is anomalous in our recent history, and we don't expect it's about 85% online, so we'll see a little bit more growth hit in 27. It didn't all hit in 26, but still, we don't expect that sort of stuff going forward. So that new growth, after it's been certified, it gets put into our base, and then we take that and apply 2.5% for next year. But our total new revenue in fiscal 27 is about $700,000. And then this is the piece up for debate. This is the stabilization used to reduce the override request. So I say stabilization, but it could be any existing resources. So it could be free cash in the first year. And then we fund the whole gap. So we have a budgetary need. We fund our inside the levy revenue gets us within $1.8 million. We use $1 million worth of override, and then we use $800,000 or $850,000 to fund the difference. What that means in year two, all the top stuff's the same, except we also get 2.5% growth on our $1 million override. So we have a little bit more total new revenue to use. The plan here is to ramp down the use of stabilization, because if we have $1.8 million worth of needs in fiscal 27, we're going to have $1.8 million plus 2% or 3% of needs in fiscal 28. So if we only have $1 million worth of override capacity and we use one-time funds once, well, the need is ongoing. So the proposal here is to use a ramped down amount, so $450,000. And then there's a gap created, which is it has the growth factor in, like I said. So I take that $737,000 you see in total new revenue for fiscal 28, and I use $417,000 of that to fund that gap. That means we have a remaining new revenue to use for all the rest of the town operations that year, over the prior year of $320,000. And then you see the stabilization balance continue to dwindle. And then apply that through all the out years. And once you get to FY 30, we stop using stabilization to fill the gap. We do it on our own, and we start repaying stabilization. And that leaves us in a deficit there. So these are pretty conservative numbers, especially in terms of new growth. And this doesn't include growth on local receipts. So we'll have a local receipt growth in here too, but these are not economically sensitive. New growth is a little economically sensitive, but Proposition 2.5 growth is not economically sensitive, right? We get to increase our levy by 2.5% a year, even if property values go to a tenth of what they are. And at any point, we can use free cash on this. Free cash has been really healthy over the last couple of years. Don't expect $2 million every year going forward.
You said that last year.
So I think I've right-sized the, I keep using that word, but I think we've taken the local receipts budget to where it needs to be, and I don't have a projection now, but we're likely in the more $1 million range, $1.25 million range rather than $2 million.
Is there a way for you to represent like I don't know what the financial term is, the loss of spending power while we're paying back stabilization? So like, what services aren't we able to offer in our long-term plan because we're paying back stabilization?
Yeah, so with the particular things, so yeah, I mean, that's a year-over-year policy decision of whatever board is here.
But I think the other thing is, I see levers here. So the rate we pay stabilization back, or the amount we take, those are adjustable. So if there is a need operationally, we potentially cost stabilization payment to fund something.
We just do that as part of budget reconciliation every year.
I think so. I mean, I see here something that's one makes, well, first, I think I'm of the opinion we need an override this year for one on the ballot, right? The question is, if we want an override to pass, what's the path that we think is tenable to the taxpayer? And then how do you financially manage the process to land the plane after the fact? I mean, this is clearly going to be very tight in outer years in terms of what we're not going to have the same flexibility we've had the last couple of years.
No,
clearly.
it's risky.
Right. But it's also, it gets a foundation in place that allows us to consider it, because if we don't do something, unless somebody says, I'm good with the full override, that's the most flexible solution, right?
My concern is that this plan doesn't take into account, this assumes that we're essentially going to see a Z form and then it's stable. Right. So we've got this giant rise right now. Is that actually going to level off? Or, everybody's crystal ball is as good as anybody else's, right? So what is our risk mitigation that this is not a Z form and we continue to see skyrocketing? I mean, this plan kind of goes out the window, and that's probably a bigger problem we're gonna have to address anyway, right? So
and if that was the case and we didn't do this mitigate taxpayer impact on the front end, that would just, we would then the next increase would be incrementally smaller, but we'd be at the same taxpayer impact 6 years from now.
right.
I just want to play devil's advocate. This proposal seems, like you said, a little risky. do you have like no confidence that a full override would even be palatable at
I
town
don't know if
meeting?
this is about confidence. I think it's really about the impact to taxpayers.
Yeah.
More than whether or not they would vote for it.
But one predicts the other. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's such an impact, when people finally look at the numbers and know in their households and know what the situation is. And if previous experience informs us at all, it's difficult to see a scenario, unless I'm very wrong, where the way it's been asked with these numbers is gonna pass without some kind of massaging. It's just. So.
That was my starting point. My starting point was what Mike had said before, that, an override is necessary. I didn't even say, what does $1.4 million in cuts look like to me? I didn't even try to do that because I don't think. And then I also, I think, like I said, on the heels of a debt exclusion and future debt exclusions, but also, the schools have said for a long time, every 5-6 years or something, an operational override is necessary because of the structural, superintendent said before, the structural deficit that schools exist in. So minimizing the impact of the next override, which said my crystal ball such as yours, was part of the idea in this approach.
I do think that it's not gonna solve the issue right now, but when we spoke with our congressman a few weeks ago and talked about it, I mean, nationwide, healthcare is a crisis. And it's gotta get resolved somehow. And, he has his thought how it could be approached, but I mean, the truth is, it's either gonna be addressed, or we're gonna see having healthcare the way that we have, because it's just not sustainable to pay for it. And the increase in the school budget based on health insurance is an indicator.
So I brought this up last week on health insurance. Finance committee wasn't here, and then I have a little bit more information, so I just wanted to bring it up again. It's not on this slide at all anywhere. But I told select board, we will see a smaller than anticipated increase in our health insurance line from fiscal 26 to 27, in that we've seen surpluses in the past couple of years. And this is being my second time going through the budget. It's part of the area which I drilled down on, who's on the plan, how much it costs, all the things. Build up the budget rather than just slide a budget over. Which is good. It's cost savings. Just didn't want to kind of freak anybody out that we didn't have enough there. But why was it like that? So prior to fiscal 20, so in fiscal 23, we had budgeted the whole of health insurance in a general government account. And the amounts that were paid out of there on a monthly basis were health, dental, and vision, where dental and vision are employee paid. There is no employer payment, but that's kind of a pass through, and it made it into our budget. And those amounts were paid through the general government department line. When we split it out to what's called 914, the health insurance line, the health or the dental and vision didn't follow that. They got put on a different part of our ledger. No revenue impact because it's all employee paid. But as the 25 budget, 24 budget was being developed, we seemingly just took the monthly amount and multiplied it by 12 and put it in as the budgetary amount. But because those employee paid vision and dental aren't actually budgetary, it created a structural surplus there in that budget.
And that one line item.
Yeah, so that's part of what drove free cash. I said we had savings in insurance, and I wasn't able until recently. And thank you, Jen O'Neill, who drilled down on it in the last couple of weeks after I asked. That's where that kind of original, I don't want to say original sin because it benefited us, but the original miss on budgeting happened. So we are going to, so we're going to see the same trajectory on health insurance that we imagine we would. We've just kind of lowered it by a little bit.
I just want to kind of bring it back to this. So what I heard is that we all agree override is on the table, right? So the idea of 1.4 million in cuts is off the table. But what I'm hearing is there's a hybrid approach, and then there's the full. Those are the two options. We either go for one bite for the full amount and override, or you try this hybrid approach, which is outlined on the slide in front of you. Now, the hybrid, those numbers are fungible. So if we want more flexibility outer years, then we are probably going to look to
Yeah, so,
skip those.
so really we could, this says 850 in stabilization in fiscal 27. That drops our stabilization balance down from $2 million. We can instead use 700,000 in free cash, keep stabilization at 2 million, spread out that drawdown period instead of ending in fiscal 29, end it in fiscal 30 or 31, and then increase the payback period proportionally, or some combination.
You're doing another.
They're fungible, but you've also committed the most of, you've drawn out of your stabilization fund right out of the gate, right?
Or free cash from reserves.
Yeah, I mean, you've taken the biggest chunk, right?
And I think that's a nice number. We haven't even decided on which additional, how much of the 446 we think is worth investing, so that could bring that 850 down to something. You know what I mean? If we get, I know we put a request in, so if that request is met and possibly the assessment gets recertified, it might come down a little more, so in this couch cushion. So that's the top of the heap. We do everything, which I don't even want to do everything. There are things on the list I've seen, I'm like, I don't think that's worth doing in the next year. But the idea is, I'm just trying to get us from a decision point. We've decided we'll probably need go for an override.
Yeah.
There's two approaches we go: full funding through an override, or we get creative, and we're really borrowing. We're earmarking 2.5 growth in the outer years to pay back what we borrow down now. And that just requires fiscal discipline. And from a 5-year planning standpoint, I think there's probably 1 or 2 future investments we've probably talked about collectively, say we think we will do those if we can. So I think year 3 firefighters, as an example.
Yeah, so
Just had the question before.
So yeah, so Jesse, go ahead.
Sorry, just what level what level of funding does this assume in the school's budget? Is that?
yes, so this takes the current year, the needs base, is that how we're referring to it, needs base, and then 4% over the next 4 years. So the 5-year plan would be 4% for the schools in each year.
So this is the 47 million sort of level needs based in their budget.
46 million, I think, was the
I think
middle
it's
one.
47, but it's the second column from the left.
Yeah.
So if we rejected the school budget, this would have a surplus.
Say that again?
I'm assuming there's going to be an ask to see what this looks like at a level funding budget of the school system, meaning the 43 million. Because this comes on the heels of a capital expenditure program for the schools, and I've heard already many people saying that a lot of these costs should have been known last year when we voted for the capital expenditures. So I just know it's going to come up, and people are going to want to see what it looks like if we run our budget assuming level funding for the schools. I hate to be the one to have to say that, but I'm surprised it hasn't come up yet.
Yeah, I get that you get that, capital and operational are different. We talked about it before, but it's going to be a chore for stakeholders to explain. I just want to make sure everybody understands that once the school committee certifies a budget, it is incumbent upon the select board to put that to voters. We can't say, oh, let's instead go with a different budget request for the schools, in ways that the select board can say, no, we're cutting the fire department, police department by $100,000. There's not that discretion.
I have one clarifying question on that 600 increase per taxpayer. Is that the same residential per commercial, or is there?
Same tax.
It's the same tax rate.
So both commercial and residential are going to see a $600 increase.
For a $650,000 valuation.
So, oh, okay,
It's a per $1,000, and we usually use the median household income to just give the general in the middle number so that you can.
Cause you're gonna be like up or down, you know.
So what we'll also do is provide that number on a per $100,000 assessed value. So if in your head, you're like, mine's 700,000, mine's 400,000, you could just multiply the $100,000.
gotcha, okay.
That Carl?
You talked about how the hybrid approach would restrict our ability, our flexibility in the future. The other question that I will be asking myself is, does the perfect storm that we've had described in all of these bad things happening just this year, is that bad enough that we should take money away from our stabilizations, pre-crash reserves piggy bank? Is it a reason to break open the piggy bank and take out money? I haven't decided yet. It's something I'm going to think about between now and Tuesday.
My rebuttal question would be, is this the purpose of stabilization? In your opinion, is this enough of an emergency to say it's justification to use your emergency funds?
Right. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so I'm fond of saying it's to stabilize operations.
Yeah.
In times of economic tumult, but in this situation, we're stabilizing operations, but we're also stabilizing tax bills.
Right. But I would historically look at a stabilization fund as part of town hall infrastructure just blew up. We have to replace it. That's a one-time expense. Whereas this is, we're looking at something that will be ongoing.
Normally, I would be completely on board with not using one-time funds for recurring expenses, right? But with the much improved fiscal long future discipline that the boards currently are putting in place and our new town administrator is supporting as boards churn, I feel more comfortable with it now than I would have in years past.
Yep. The whole perfect storm thing.
Yeah. Can I ask, like, is any, and this is gonna sound like a dumb question, is this money invested?
Yep.
So we're gonna lose investment money, right? And is that taken into account?
So we have really 4 pots. We have our very short-term stuff, our cash management stuff. We have this, which is our more medium-term. We have bond proceeds, which are restricted in a very specific way. And then we have our trust funds. And so the trust funds, which are invested in a much longer horizon, are what really generate a lot for us. Our stabilization is in like essentially a high yield savings account.
Okay.
So we're at,
Like it's approachable money and it's,
3.5%, 4%.
yeah, definitely not 4%. I'd have to look, but probably in the high 2s. And then our cash, maybe stabilization is a little bit higher than that. But yeah, then our cash is probably the high 2s. So you may be right. We have once we put in short-term products like CDs and things like that.
Yep.
and then we will have to in the warrant article or in the motion allocate out of stabilization.
2/3 vote.
So in the warrant article, you can say a sum of money. And then in what I have been writing up as my warrant report, I would approximate the dollar value. The warrant would say a dollar value for an override. Just because the ballot question has to have a dollar value for the override, the board has to decide by Tuesday. So in my opinion, at least might as well print that in the warrant to let folks know. But it would be in the motion for that.
So we would then be going to a 2/3 request as opposed to a majority, or is 2/3 on the, I don't know what the count is required for the.
2/3 for the stabilization.
2/3 on the stabilization.
But is it 2/3 for the override as well? That's just majority, right?
Which is why historically things pass at town meeting and fail at the ballot.
Yeah, so what's a higher hurdle in your mind? 2/3 at town meeting for a stabilization or 50% plus 1 at the ballot for an override?
Or even.
I guess what happens mechanically if the stabilization move does not pass, but the override does?
Well, stabilization would be within town meeting, that's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but let's just say at town meeting that doesn't pass, right? But they decide to go forward with the override.
So I think I have them separate right now. I think we can link them.
Could we do?
The budget vote would be contingent on using stabilization. Yeah, I need help from town council.
Then,
Yeah.
then it would require.
Because the problem is you could always make, make an amendment within the town meeting if you do the stabilization first. But then, so the problem is, it's on the ballot and you can't change that number.
So I'll have a menu from council of kind of if then for town meeting, so.
Yeah.
Both meetings know about it.
It really has to be presented as a package. We're funding.
Correct.
Budget and
It has to be presented as a package, but people can still vote it in weird ways.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to assume that it will go the way the package intends, just in case.
no, I mean,
But yeah, but at the end of the day, they both have to pass.
Agreed. Yeah.
And if they don't, it'll fail.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we have the mechanics in place to cover all of our bases.
Agreed.
For whatever weirdness can happen.
I have some.
plan for weirdness.
Plan for weirdness, right?
I have just, these are what makes up the additions. So we haven't gone through these as a list, so these are the 14 different categories of additions that make up the 446,000. So like I said, I'll get a comprehensive document out to both boards. But some of these are linked. We see 1A, 1B, that's the pay for I talked about. And then same with police. It says police, but it's admin assistant. It's taking the fire executive assistant, which is now currently shared between police and fire at the police department, moving that to the fire department and reducing hours to 32 a week, and then replacing that for the 40-hour a week administrative assistant in the police department. Fire, 2 new FTEs, as we talked about, and then a lot of smaller pieces here. We have to talk about as much as anybody has questions on.
Have the school board said that they'd be willing to take more reserves? Or
We're
have
meeting
you-
on Monday.
Which is why we're meeting on Tuesday.
Okay, so we don't even, that creative proposal that you came up with, we don't even know, they may say no.
So what I put here, what I put here is, I see here, some emails. What I put on the previous slide, with using $1 million plus 800,000 was funding everything on this slide, and the school doing nothing to change it. So once there's decisions on these 14 categories of items, and we know what the school final certification number is, then it becomes a decision on how much do you want to put on the override versus how much do you want to use existing resources.
Okay,
So hopefully, I mean, that's the maximum number from a municipal standpoint. Hopefully we can bring that number down, impact to the municipal.
gotcha.
Yeah, I kind of had an anchoring thing in my head of either $1 million on an override or, like a $50 a month on a taxpayer. Like,
The superintendent drives an electric car. I believe that is a VW backup.
Well, that's true. Nowhere near as cool as that.
Okay, so we said all those things. Like I said, we do have to have, I don't know, we don't have to vote, but we should all say that out loud. Elena, Brendan, Mike,
People already asked the question that I was trying to ask, so
Okay.
it's about the mechanics and the, not sure that we got to all of them, but
well, but Jeremy, when you say you're gonna do an if then else, is that like a table, graphic, who will understand it?
Python script.
we're getting to uniform. I guess I'm not sure until I know.
All right, and then so we won't know how to address that, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
You know.
gonna call council.
Okay.
Say, and yeah, we'll,
And is there anybody, I'll ask out loud, is there anybody who wants to put the full amount with no adjustments, as, Jeremy pointed out here onto the
I guess I do have the question because what levers do we have if this doesn't pass? So, right, so I mean, it seems like there's the full amount and then there's this intermediate amount. But in the event that it fails, we put in the lower amount, we people vote to use stabilization, then what happens? Then,
We don't have a place to go.
No.
Yeah, so
yeah, I guess
That's how I kind of envision it.
the money's been appropriated. It's not been fully appropriated. So I believe if the school budget does not pass in its entirety, it's not funded in its entirety, that counts as a failure on our part and that 4-part piece that Jay, right? So in which case, it would be incumbent, then the school committee has to recertify and we would have another vote. So if the base budget
Another
passes,
town meeting and
stabilization
an election.
passes, then override fails, go back to school committee to say recertify, and they can come back with the same number, they come back with a lower number, the whole finance. So then if they come back with a lower number, the stabilization money would remain, that vote is there. It's not contingent on the override passing. And then we would have a lower override amount if the schools came back with a lower amount. But if that failed those 3 times, that waterfall that we were talking about before, even if the stabilization money was there, the schools would still be in a 1/12 budget situation.
Could we have a vote at the if then kind of like we do like a vote, like vote A is if our vote at ballot fails, our plan B is this stabilization vote. And if we pass it by 2/3, we've already passed it. Like, can you see if we can do that? So we don't have to revote at town meeting?
So I wouldn't advocate funding the whole increase with stabilization.
is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying the second proposal.
That's what I thought is like,
I'm sorry.
can you do a full, I thought I heard full override for the full amount.
Yeah,
And let's talk away stabilization over here in case this fails.
at
It would not
ballot.
be full override, would be $800,000. You know what I mean? So if they came back with a lower amount that this could cover, we wouldn't have to have another vote. That's what I heard.
Correct.
So could, you know what I mean? I think that's you're driving an efficiency process.
That's a choose your own adventure.
They literally choose their own investment warrant.
Yeah.
That to me, what you're saying is if we do $1 million override, $800,000 stabilization, and then they come back with $1 million lower.
I just like to think outside the box, you
I
know?
just don't think they're gonna come back with $1 million less.
Okay, what do we need to say tonight?
So tonight, you need to say to me, that you're comfortable with a hybrid approach and that all
Or
of
not.
this stuff, or not. Yes, yeah, I kind of love the way this.
Do you guys want to vote?
And the order should stay on the ballot or the warrant.
Seems like you do.
There's 2 other things too. We really need to give you some direction on our addition summary. Are we really gonna go full 46? It's these things we really need to do this year.
So you all can take a vote tonight.
Yeah.
I can bring up a more dynamic thing, that shows.
And then there's maybe this is Tuesday, Jeremy, but if we go hybrid, we can work with what we think the right balance is between taxpayer impact and stabilization usage. Just work those levers. We can do that on Tuesday, if we choose that approach.
Right.
I think Brendan wants a full override. I can feel the vibes.
Full override, full override is $600 per person?
Yeah.
It was 900?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's too much.
So yeah, I'm taxpayer impact, but I don't want to set us up for failure. I want to play with the numbers.
Well, I mean, realistically, even
Even if
we're
we're
gonna, there's probably an override coming in 5th year when you think about this, right?
Yeah.
Just, it will not be, the thing about this override is we've been talking about it for a few years, is the magnitude. Did not expect this magnitude. I expected more of $1 million.
This actually
I don't-
probably would have been easier if we needed an override in 2020 and we're talking
Right.
about it again 5-6 years later.
What I don't like seeing is us still not recovering from the first request by the time the next request is possibly coming.
And this doesn't account for any of our requests as a municipality.
Yeah, I guess, but we're still.
But that to me is then maybe we need to up the tax impact a little bit and reduce the stabilization.
Exactly, that's what I'm talking about.
So we
I
gotta
think
work
it's the
the
right
leverage
approach.
right numbers.
Just keep in mind that there was a dead add of, 400-ish for the 650 house last year. So, in the course of 2 years, we could be increasing up to $1,500 for the average size house if we went for the full amount. If we went for the full, the saying it's 900, 900 to 1,000, 450 to 500, it's a lot of money,
Yeah.
right? So.
So I agree with the approach. I just think we need to game it out for different number scenarios.
We need to work the numbers.
Yeah.
That's his job.
Well,
You just give it a direction. Make it work better.
So I don't think we can go through the painful line by line, but I think we need to be ready for that on Tuesday.
So I will get this out to you before the weekend. You being FinCom as well.
Give the
I
feedback.
was just saying, do you want everybody's charts?
Yeah, that'd be useful.
Okay.
Because I don't think on Tuesday is Tuesday virtual or is it?
I had initially thought to pause virtual, but I think there's going to be discussion on stuff like this. Then
It's good to hear.
be more helpful.
I agree. Like if we're gonna have these types of discussions, we should make in person available.
The school committee, so they're meeting on Monday. But if they were to use some of their reserves as proposed in one scenario, they would need to recertify the budget. Do they need to have a new hearing for that? Okay, just a recertification.
And they'd already, it's a regular meeting, they'd already posted it.
And do you know where Upton stands in all of this?
I was supposed to meet with the town manager after our meeting the other day and she was ill and it'll be scheduled to later this week, tomorrow.
sneaks up.
Are you allowed to share with us if you figure out what, or is that breaking?
Upton? Oh, they talked about meetings. They're looking
I
at
think
the,
there are warrants out there.
they're looking at the $2.5 million number.
I think.
Or do you mean school committee?
Oh,
No, the
question-
answer, to
Oh.
answer Elena's question, if you get the sense of where they stand on this, are you allowed to share that with us or no, that breaks meeting laws?
No, right?
If it's public, then.
Yeah, it's public. It's also not selected officials.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think any of their thinking is secret. And I think the school committee, I shouldn't say that. I'm talking to any school committee members. The school administration was receptive to take it to school committee, the request.
So Upton is doing it 2.5.
Upton also has a mass debt exclusion.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So those will be two separate ballot questions.
And they still have
So you're saying Upton is just putting it to the voters and do it operational.
multiple.
Two.
A debt exclusion. I don't know, right? Yeah, I was just reading it in the paper.
What's their average median household?
I think it is.
800?
Not far.
All right, does anybody want to talk about anything more around the budget transfer?
Yeah, I have, so this is actually is a FinCom only vote, according to our accountant. So we have an invoice from OpenGov for our online licensing.
Yep.
It's paid out of our IT account and it was not clear to me that when we did our budget last year that this is where it was paid out of. So we don't have enough money to continue to pay our IT vendor and pay our online permitting. So this is asking for a $24,000 transfer from our $78-ish thousand reserve fund into our 155, our IT fund to pay for online permitting services that weren't previously budgeted.
So that's coming out of FinCom reserves?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's 78 in there right now, 78 now.
Yes. I can pull it up, but
Yeah,
we haven't touched it, so whatever we touched,
Yeah.
78 change. We're-
And we're not putting anything in there at ATM?
No, we should have sufficient between that and the select board, supply and that sort of stuff. We should be okay.
All right,
There will be, sorry, let me backtrack. There will likely be other transfers from places we have some surpluses for some stuff that was either unknown or unbudgeted, but we don't need anything on reserves.
As the recording secretary, I have a request. Jeremy, can you please write up the motion that he's about to say and email it to me so I can get it in the minutes?
Sure. Type it in. So I'm not the chair, but I think the chair is looking for a motion to transfer $24,000 from FinCom reserves to computer maintenance contracts, account 155-5436.
can I get a motion for what Jeremy just said?
I so move.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mm.
All right, all those in favor, we need to do a roll call vote.
Really?
Article I.
Billy Haddad, aye.
Jesse Curley.
Ron Zamuto, aye.
Fraser, aye.
Thank you. And then, so also this needs to be signed by a majority of finance committee and 2 of you are remote. So do both of you give the chair your authorization to sign on your behalf?
Jesse
Yes.
Curley, do.
Ron Zamuto, yes.
Thank you. All right, that's all I have.
All right. FinCom, do you guys want to close your meeting?
Get a motion to close FinCom.
I so move.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Roll call.
Carl Hummel, yes. Aye.
Billy Haddad, yes.
Jesse Curley.
Ron Zamuto, aye.
FinCom's closed at 9:45 p.m.
All right, so our next meeting will be on Tuesday at 6:30 PM and then following on Wednesday at 6:30 PM. The Tuesday meeting, however interesting it will be, the Wednesday meeting is the Providence Culvert discussion starting at 6:30 PM sharp. We'll try to limit that discussion to the first 30 minutes. We'll see how successful we are with that. For the community that's still listening, for the people in the room, there is a website, providenceculvert.com. Super easy to get to, has all of the things that we have talked about. Also has the meeting link for the meeting next Wednesday, which you can also find on our website. That's all I have to say about that. I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Who made their website? It's really good.
This weird guy.
It's free time, huh?
With my copious free time. Yeah, so did I hear a second? I did. All right, all those in favor? Aye. All right, have a great night. I'm closing this meeting at 9:46 PM.
Tuesday.
I have a list.